I'm doing this. I don't even know where to start, right? So,
how was your drive in?
Oh
yeah, that's an opening question.
That's an opening question there.
That's a very opening question.
No, so. All right, we got episode 1 of the Quiet Resolve podcast. We got Brandon Thone with us here. Brandon, say hi for everybody.
How's it going?
You know, Brandon's been a good friend of mine for, what is it, like 10 years now almost?
10 years?
Yeah, about 10 years.
10 years.
About a decade, you know. It's been a long time. We're getting older, right? It doesn't seem like that long. It feels like it was yesterday, but Brandon and I deployed together to Qatar and the Saudi Arabian border in the Middle East back in 2016 and 17. You know, we spent a lot of time together over there, and we've been very close friends for a long time. You know, you've been in the Guard, what, 10 years, 11 years?
Just past 11 this year.
Yeah, so you're right at about where I am. Recently promoted to staff sergeant. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a big deal. So Brandon just spent the last year in Syria, deployed to do counterterrorism, counter supply chain, anti-ISIS operations?
Kind of, pretty much. Originally I was there for ISIS, yeah. It's kind of more of support originally for the Syrian Defense Force, which now that policy is no longer in standings with the U.S. The U.S. military, as far as I know when I left, we don't have.
So you guys no longer have the policy where you can only fight ISIS?
Yeah, so we still have Taliban was also another.
Okay, so it's a number of different.
It was an ISIS and Taliban on site, no questions asked. You can shoot them, but it's kind of hard because they don't wear uniforms.
Right.
But
Sure.
The SDF was who we partnered with. It's like that's who would go on patrols with us. That's who we were kind of like upbringing to stabilize the region.
Right.
But towards the end, I guess there was some conflict with Turkey at some point. So the U.S. kind of pulled back and said, hey, we're not aiding the SDF. The only thing we can give them is medical. So, which is still weird because we still did a lot of operations with them.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. But yeah, so I mean, deployment experience as we go. This was your second time. This is your first time in a leadership position, in a leadership role, and like an actual real world operation, right? Because in the Guard, we don't do this every day. So I mean, as far as your deployment experience, you were a team leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your roles and responsibilities as far as the mission set. You know, what all was disseminated down to your level? Like, what did you deal with on a daily basis?
Well, I dealt on a daily basis with my Joes. That was
right.
My Joes. We lived in the same tent. Team leaders and below lived in the same tent, which is fine because you kind of stay with them, you get to work with them more, see what's going on in their personal life. But that would probably have to be probably one of the hardest challenges because you get in this mindset where you kind of kick off home. You know, I had a new baby. Was previously just married before I left.
Yeah, I remember that was rough on you.
Yeah,
having a baby right before you go is a big deal.
Yeah, so a lot of people think it's family. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a pretty hardship there. But it's not quite as bad. You're there for one reason. You can't be thinking of home a lot. You have your time on Skype or on Facebook, whatever you would use. But the main focus was always the Joes because without them, you're not a team.
Yeah, absolutely. Your soldiers are everything, and I'm glad you say that because, with the whole aspect behind Quiet Resolve is like Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly, carry a big stick. People are your most important asset, right? And I think that's something that's been lost in society is we look at people as replaceable. And when you're in a combat situation or you're in any kind of military operation, you find out very quickly that you cannot just replace people. People get replaced, but it never works out the same way as that guy that you've had as part of your team for years.
Absolutely.
So what was the most challenging aspect of your whole time in Syria for you?
I would say, so I feel like at least on the infantry side, you rehearse. Rehearsal is what makes you lethal on the battlefield. Same thing we were just talking about, you get replacements. You get new Joes that come in, you get guys that get out, so you kind of have to refresh it all the time. But going from here in Missouri, and where we normally train is a big wooded environment, going to a complete flat plain, there's no cover, trying to get in the mindset and a way to where you could teach your guys worst case scenarios, on how to work with that was probably the hardest thing, I would say. It was just the environment. It all around was a different environment. It's not the way we typically were training on. We weren't training for, taking IDF and drones.
Well, right, no, we use Operation T, right? It's the peer-on-peer adversary. We're running through the woods. We're using our local terrain here in Missouri to figure out, exactly how to shoot, move, and communicate. And then you go somewhere completely different in the world, and you're like, oh, crap, none of my training really, like...
Yeah, you kind of sit there, and you really got to have, like, a common sense factor into it. Because if you don't figure it out, your guys aren't going to figure it out. So... probably the hardest thing on it was just trying to adapt to it. The adaptation of just a whole new world, literally. It's like another planet there compared to where we live here in Missouri. It's different weather, different living conditions, different culture over there, bunch of different cultures in one country. But
really?
Yeah.
Like, what are you looking at there? I mean, obviously you've got Arab culture and you've got Islamic culture and things like that. But
so,
what else are you seeing there?
So a thing that we were seeing there was a lot of different, I would say, smaller like villages from all neighboring different countries, and I'm talking from I'm talking about Christian backgrounds, Jewish backgrounds, just all these different religions is one thing. Okay. But just because you're a Christian, there's tons of different branches of that, and they're pretty much getting kicked out or pushed out from their original countries, and they're just wandering around all throughout the Middle East. And
so they're just kind of like nomading it from country to country as the countries slowly kick them out.
So you'll go to one village one day, you go to another village a mile up the road, and it's a completely different culture. You'll see like a lot of slavery there, a lot of work slavery. I mean, it's crazy how much you see there.
We talking like what we saw in Qatar with the indentured servitude?
A lot worse. There was just right outside the FOB. I mean, you could see it everywhere. There was kids, 3 years old, 2 years old. I mean, old enough to walk. They were herding sheep all day, and I'm talking like 118, 120 degree weather with humidity, rain. They were out there all night. You'll see these little flashlights in the middle of the night, and that's what they were using to fight off. I guess to see, there's wild dogs everywhere. I guess they protect their sheep. Mm-hmm. That was like, I would say a pretty big shock there was seeing I'm talking kids, and they're just the hardest working things I've ever seen, and they'll be out there without water. They won't be out there with food. Like their dad will drop them off on a motorcycle, and another thing is you go on these foot patrols and you'll walk around and you'll see these tall, kind of like stands, like PT stands, and if you get there early in the morning, so we normally step off at night. And then daybreak would hit, and then we're in these fields, so we kind of use the movement of night for cover. You'll see like 20 kids and like a handful of women living on these stands. No cover on them, no shade, no water, no nothing, just a wooden platform in the air. And then you'll see this little mud hut, and that's where the men stay. So it was the culture of that, of maybe American, is that you would want to provide shelter, security for your family,
protect,
and it's completely opposite. Jeez. So just the view of how, they see their children, I feel like, maybe back how we did, back during the Great Depression, you wanted kids to be workers to bring you finances. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can relate it to that way, but that was, to this day, I can't wrap my head around that. Because, you just see kids out there all day long.
No, yeah, that's absolutely wild. I didn't realize that Syria was so diverse, right? I mean, I haven't been there, right? But you get this picture in your head, even when you go to certain countries in the Middle East. Like when we were in Qatar, it was primarily Arabs, and then there was a lot of Filipino workers that came in as indentured servants and helped build the FIFA World Cup, right? I mean, I remember driving by it and watching somebody fall off of that thing. And I was like, oh my God, it's wild. The worker safety that you see that's different there, and it really puts into perspective. Like when you did you have the same experience when it's like when we got to Qatar? I remember I felt like I couldn't breathe because there was just no green.
It was, so we landed, it was definitely a big shock, and I was thinking about this actually last night. Mm-hmm. I had all the lights turned off in the house, and I don't know why, but I just thought back when we first landed in Syria. We got dropped off on a plane in the middle of the night. We didn't have, we put our NVGs on. You couldn't see much. We were just in there, counting our guys, make sure we all had our our SI, we had all the weapons, everybody had all their gear. Because we only had like a duffel and a ruck,
Right.
And
a bag and a go bag, and everything else is on a boat or something coming over later.
Then,
right?
You got like 30 things and a set of items on you that you're like trying to make sure everybody has. And things are just going. You got these guys that are there on the fob, like telling you, like, hey, go this way, get the hell out of here. Because we're just, I didn't know at the time, we're just in the wide open. And so we start making our way. It is dark. I mean, there's not a light in sight. There's no illumination. The moon wasn't out that night. You couldn't see anything. And then, you walk behind people who have their nods on still. I remember putting my nods up, and I was like, screw it, I'm filing on this line. Next thing I know, some guy's talking. I can't hear him, because it's just not a loud person. I'm trying to look around, and we had a few guys go before us. They were trying to give us the rundown real quick. The first thing I remember everybody telling us, like, hey, there's a bunker here, there's a bunker there, and you're like, oh, okay, but you can't see anything. No. And honestly, I've been waiting all day for like 24 hours to get that flight over there, and I haven't slept, and I'm just like, dude, I got all this gear, I just want to get to my tent, find my cot, and go to bed. I'll figure this out in the morning. I remember the big culture shock was when I came out of the tent, the first morning, and it was, the sun was up. It was not at all what I expected. It was tent city, and it was just Hesco's, that's all you saw was this wall.
Yeah.
So I remember, like, the one thing I wanted to do was go peek over the Hesco and see what it was like out there. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I had a meeting, went to the meeting, and I just, I'm in my La La Land now. I should have been listening more, but I was like, I just want to know what's going on out there. Because it was just the do's and don'ts. Like, hey, here's a gym,
right.
Be nice to the weights. We only have X amount, it's pretty janky.
Orientation to the fob kind of thing.
Pretty much, okay. Yeah. But I remember peeking over, and it was not all I expected. It was a lot of farmland, and not the farmlands.
It's not Illinois green farmland, right?
Exactly. It's not like you see corn and everything. You looked up, and they had just tilled up like everything, and so it was just like a big mound of dried up dirt, as far as the eye can see. And there were oil refineries everywhere.
Okay.
You just saw black smoke everywhere, which is weird. Unlike a guitar, that smog would cover. The sky. It wasn't like that. It was actually pretty. The air quality here is definitely better in Missouri than it is there. Right. But it was definitely better than Qatar, though. You still see the stars at night pretty well.
Yeah. I remember getting off the plane, on the way home, and like the second we got off the plane and saw green, I could feel my lungs expand like 10 times over. You're like, holy crap! Like, so I didn't realize the air is. And then you get back to America and you smell that, and you're like. There's something different, like American air smells different than anywhere else, and you're like, oh yeah, this is.
So the big smell there though was the water they had. It's weird because they have the Euphrates that goes through the middle of the country, but we were pretty far away from it, and the rain season, is what it is. There's a rain season. It only rains one time a year, for at least when I was there, and we got there right in the middle of July, and so it was pretty hot, and there was not much water on the ground as is, but so they would recycle their water.
Right.
And it was the worst smell ever. You get a good breeze that comes in, and it's just gut-wrenching. And, and then we're buying our water to shower with from them. So, there's, our few shower houses we have, and you're just constantly smelling that. But you get over that pretty quick. But coming back to the States.
Oh, yeah. Even in Qatar, you like, taking cold showers every day, and you didn't deal with that, but we did out on the fob. Like, you'd have just, if it was a hot day, you had a hot shower. If it was a cold day, you had a cold shower. So that's just the way it was, because your water sat up in this little tower and was just gravity fed, right?
So that was a pro, though, being there. That's what we originally thought. We were gonna have these, tubs that are heated by the sun.
Right.
We had little water heaters. Don't get me wrong, the water. Hot water did go out sometimes.
We've come a long way since 2006, right?
Yeah. I'm glad we had showers
as far as amenities. That's that. Yeah, I didn't expect there to be like such a cultural diversity there. You always expect some, but it's different to hear about, especially like the nomadic Christians and things like that are moving throughout there. I didn't know about that, and that just might be my lack of knowledge, but so you're there, you're in this new country, you're trying to like, really acclimate and adjust to what looks like you're on another planet, right? And while you're there, you've got a mission, so like, and I know, and just for everybody listening, everyone that was on this mission had to sign non-disclosure agreements because of the nature of the assignment and the mission that they were on. So there are certain things that we cannot talk about during this podcast. But just from a blanket perspective, what the primary objective of your mission, like what were you guys there for?
So the mission originally, and it kind of changed without say, if it's about as much as I can get into that part. Our mission originally was because there were still ISIS cells. There were still 4 compounds that we knew of at the time. I know that's changed now, so I know it's fine to say.
So are these like training compounds, like ISIS basic training compounds,
or
is this like
we had pretty much everybody in the region had beat the living crap out of them and pushed them into these just few compounds.
Okay,
it was kind of like their last retreat.
So it's like strongholds.
Yeah, and and they wouldn't spend all their time there, and they would mix in with the local population. I mean, they were bouncing around. They're smart. So we originally knew that they were there, and we were there for like a kind of like a QRF to another element that was out there.
Right.
And then kind of scheduled out for possible go like just months prior to that, we had went ahead and seized one of the compounds that was occupied by ISIS right before we got there. They came before us. They had a good time up there. They were met with.
So is this the 10th Mountain Unit that was there, or is this?
This was the Michigan National Guard.
So the Michigan National Guard got to perform a raid on an ISIS stronghold.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I mean, a lot of people would never think that an Army National Guard unit does anything like that, right? But yeah. It's crazy when you start to figure out that. I mean, and the article came out, was it 6 months ago maybe, that like the National Guard's been secretly, or not really secretly, but like quietly filling the role of the active duty force for a very long time now.
Yeah.
Our infantry brigade combat teams have been deploying all over the Middle East and doing all kinds of really cool operations. And so Michigan National Guard raids this compound. You get there, right?
Yeah, so, what originally started, what I think really kicked off the raid, was that there was a prison break that, who exactly, I'm not too sure to this day, held the prison, but there was a prison break, and it was a 32-hour firefight that the Michigan National Guard got into, and I'm talking like 320s, I'm talking 240s ripping out 50 cals, like there was a huge.
So they're in it.
They were in it, and we heard this right before we ripped out. We were still here in the States, doing regular drill weekends, trying to get things together.
You're getting your slow pieces of the puzzle as before you go.
And our platoon sergeant came in, and it was like, hey. This just happened, and you kind of get that moment where like, oh, another deployment, and the gut drop kind of hits. You're like,
sure, right, it's real now.
Yeah, but then also you're like, 32 hours, and you're hearing all the rounds they expended. You're hearing what they were using, like a real firefight, and you're like, this sounds pretty dope.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of people don't understand the mentality of an 11 Bravo. It's hard for them to. It's hard for them to wrap their head around that, But like we the way we train, the way and for everybody that listens to this, one of the things that like I'd really like to get across, at least from this perspective for this episode, is that when you're in a combat arms profession, whether you're just a standard conventional infantryman in the Army National Guard, or you're a Tier 1 Special Forces operator, Navy SEAL, Green Beret, all that. I mean, when you train for years for a job, you want to do the job. You want to do your job, and it's not because you want to go kill somebody. It's not because you have this like weird psychotic thing in your brain. It's just a simple fact of like, you signed this piece of paper saying that you're willing to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and that you're willing to go fight for your country. And to not get that opportunity takes a toll on you, because you never know if you're going to be able to do it until you're there. It's an unknown factor. You don't, because you don't know how you're going to react until you experience rounds going over your head. You don't, am I going to, hide behind a rock and cry, yeah, or am I going to kick into gear, and is my training going to take over and I'm able to fulfill the job that I said that I was willing to do? So it's something that a lot of people don't think about. But so yeah, you're excited, right? I mean, you're like, I'm going to get to go experience this thing that of all these heroes that I saw, especially for us growing up. I mean, you and I, we're some of the youngest people that remember 9/11 happening, mm-hmm. right? I mean, I remember exactly where I was when it happened, and I was in the school drop-off line, and I hear the broadcast come across the radio, and we're all like, I don't even know what it means, but I remember hearing the broadcast, hearing the World Trade Center got attacked, and then we went into the classroom, and the teacher just turns it on, that old box TV's hanging in the corner of the classroom, right? Yeah. And then we see the second tower go down, and then we all got called to the gym, and then we all got taken home, But so we remember that, and we remember seeing all these people join and leave and then come home and tell us stories when we're kids about, going off and fighting in this foreign country because somebody attacked us, right? So for us, it's a really big deal to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, continue on. So Michigan's got this raid. You guys are hearing about it. You're excited. You're also getting that gut drop. Oh my gosh, I'm deploying.
Yeah. So I remember we were, I feel like it was a mutual thing, kind of, we were talking about 9/11. A lot, at least the guys I hang out with, like, NCOs, we're all about the same age. And you're saying, you grew up hearing this word terrorist, you didn't know what the hell that word meant.
Right, no.
Not at all. And so you grew up in your whole life knowing these things, these guys are bad. And then you hear ISIS originally is supposed to be your enemy over there, and you find out that, they're no longer going to be a problem.
Kind of on their last leg.
Yeah, so you get pretty excited on that. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, wasn't stoked, to go out there and do that.
Right. I mean, but there is a level.
There is a level where it's like our modern day Nazis. It's
Absolutely.
somebody that I just don't believe. My belief is should be on this earth for what they do.
Right. Anybody that's willing to just kill somebody for just having a different belief than you,
it's be on this earth. It's just
right.
Yeah. But yeah, so
at least anybody that's acting on it, you know what I mean? Like, because a lot of people have thoughts, but it's a whole different thing to base an entire organization solely on the purpose of committing genocide. I mean, I think everybody can agree with the fact that people in that headspace that are acting on genocidal, homicidal, actions on a organizational level, that organization does not stand to exist in the world.
No,
we're way too advanced as a people to be able to deal with that. It's crazy. So you're fighting ISIS, right? That's the mission.
That was the mission. It was there that we were to go there.
And then what did it change to? I mean, what? So I know you can't say everything, but you went from like an actual we're here to take out the last bit of the ISIS strongholds in Syria, and so they're no longer becoming a problem. Where are you transitioning? Are you just like kind of in a holding pattern, or what are you doing at that point?
We landed there in Kuwait. They did a little brief on everything. We landed in Syria. We're thinking, first morning, we're gonna start going patrols, and everything got put on pause. No idea why. Next thing we know, we're up in towers. We're sitting there under base protection.
You're just in a holding pattern.
We're just in a holding for about a month, and we're just like telling ourselves, I'm sitting there thinking, great, I'm just sitting at a tower, like at least I get to work out.
Here we go again.
Here we go again. At least you get a combat patch out of it.
Right.
And and at the same time, I'm thinking like, okay, I have a new family. Maybe this is the best thing for it. And then the next thing we know, we get a rocket strike in the middle of the night. You know, first time I ever taken IDF, and that was probably one of the most surreal moments of my entire life. Was that?
I can imagine.
Well, it was weird because looking back now, not trying to sound like conspiracy theorist, but like the intelligence that the United States gets is unbelievable. Like how they always know what's going on around the world. It blows your mind because we went from 2 weeks of just doing nothing. Just learning the ropes. Not much activities going on in the FOB.
Right.
Guys are ripping out. We're fully taking over.
You think they were just watching you?
The enemy?
Yeah.
Oh, you're being watched 24/7.
Well, I mean, we know that, but one thing I've heard from a lot of guys who have deployed multiple times, especially, is that two things really happen when new units come in. They either get hit right off the bat,
or they wait
and see how they're operating and see if they're going to be complacent.
So they definitely know. So right outside our FOB was an SDF compound. And those guys...
Okay, so Syrian Defense Forces, for those who don't know what SDF means, right?
So they were... I mean, you honestly probably throw a baseball and hit their T-balls. They were right outside our ECP. You had to go through their compound to get to our compound.
Okay.
And anybody could see it. I mean, it's just a wide open area. But some of those guys were pretty cool. I will say right now, pretty cool guys. Pretty cool. They have a huge belief, it was literally their homes, and they were pushed out by the Syrian government, to believe they didn't believe their own civil war is what they're been going through for years.
Right.
And so some of those guys are pretty cool. They take their life very serious. And then you have these other guys that are just there for a paycheck. How much they make? Probably, $20 a month or something. And those guys are sketchy, and they get bought out just like most of the places in that region of the world. Hey, here's $100. I want you to tell us as much as you can about the Americans. And you really got a real skeptic on them, because they're constantly around you. They're not in the FOB, but they're right outside.
Yeah, they can just grab a pair of binos and probably see a lot if they wanted to.
So, and then you have these farmers too that are, again, I was saying practically. You can't even say practically they're slaves. How they become slaves, there's a whole bunch of different things they do there. Sometimes they go for like a medical bill, get a loan from somebody, and they have such a high interest as what the person they give them the loan as, and it's because they can't pay it back, they put them into work slavery for like the rest of their life, and they pass it down generation to generation. But yeah, you'll get these guys, and they'll next thing you know, they're been farming.
So it's almost like a mob loan shark indebtment kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're this person in your family owed this money to us. They're no longer here, so now you owe it. Like, it's not like a bank where you just, you die and it's gone.
Yeah, so and the problem with those, from what I was gathering, that these loans that they give them, they don't tell you how much the medical bill was at the end, and they don't tell you how much your interest is, and they won't ever tell you how much you have left. So they just use it as an excuse to...
You still owe us. You're going to keep working.
And, and then things come up like, hey, we're hungry. We don't have enough money to make food because we're paying you all this money. Can we get another loan? Or like, they're working all the time. Hey, we had another injury. They're in a war zone too. We had another injury, another loan. It's just a downward spiral for those people. But, you get these farmers, though, that work, 2 fields over, a mile out, maybe not a mile, but a pretty far distance out to where you can't see them with, like, iron sights. Next thing you know, they're right up on your berm, And there was, we had these few vehicles that came by. There was this white van that came by every time after we got attacked. And then we had this black truck that was an SDF truck, a Syrian Defense Force truck, that was in the compound right next to us.
Sure.
And it would always drive by the direction that these drones were coming from. And it would always go before we got attacked, and it would always pop up after we got attacked. And he would talk to some locals, and then he would drift off. Again, nothing was ever proven of it, but you can kind of put two together. But yeah, you start picking up that these locals are definitely watching you, giving you intel, and everybody, nobody wears uniforms over there. You know, bad guys they're smart, and they'll just look like a farmer, and they'll drive by on a motorcycle. I mean, you have farmers everywhere, and next thing you know, every now and then you'll see them snap a picture or something, or they'll zoom in on you. I mean, technology's so advanced, you can buy a cell phone and zoom in on somebody a mile away.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, you can take a picture of the moon now, right?
Yeah, but so we end up finding on now X, it used to be Twitter, X, you hop on an account there and you're on a VPN, and since you're in a different country, it's not really restricted at all, like zero. And you're finding, next thing, I remember one day we were it was a few months later after we were getting attacked a few times. I remember finding a video and like no crap. There, me and another one of my specialists, we were in a tower and we were getting zoomed in on right before we got attacked. Like
no kidding.
Video
so they're posting it on social media that they're attacking you.
So what I was gathering is that I mean they always know. Everybody out there knows more than we do as as Joes and NCOs, but like. Yeah, they'll film you before you get attacked, and like I mean, you can find every attack that we had on Twitter or on X, like every single one, almost like I mean every.
God, I mean it.
So yeah,
the whole war in Afghanistan's been basically live streamed to the world from YouTube and GoPro action from soldiers, but like to think that they're doing it on their end too, that's wild.
What's crazy though is that you have these slaves that have no money at all. Next thing you know, they have these great cell phones and cameras and. Where are they getting these phones and cameras from?
Right.
But
so everything's on Twitter.
Everything's on Twitter. Everything was on Twitter. That's honestly we're getting most of their movement too. Because obviously
it's hilarious to me to think that you could like hop on Twitter and like find a post where it's like we're gonna go attack the Americans.
So there was a. I should have brought notes, but there was a group that was they pretty much want to liberate all of the half of Syria and push us Americans out and the other allied forces out, and they started from the Euphrates and pushed literally through the country. And at first it was like 100, 200, and then went to the next village 300, 500. Next thing we knew. We were following them on Twitter, and they were coming, and there was thousands. And at the time there was only 900 Americans in all of Syria when we were
right.
There. So you have on this file. I'll disclose how many there are because it might still be the same, but there definitely wasn't enough.
You're outnumbered.
Yeah,
you're outnumbered.
It was. I mean, if not 10,000, if not more. It was. I'm not kidding. Like 20 miles straight line of traffic of these people that were trying to liberate. Syria in their terms. So I remember that was a worry, but we were following them on Twitter. I'm sure, our intel was already on that, but it kind of helped us out because we're like, all right, we know you get a better picture off of Twitter. So yeah, Twitter is like the key over there that we were using. Of course, as soon as they got close to us, they just kind of...
I mean, how much more intel could you, were you getting more intel from Twitter than you were from
Yeah, absolutely.
That's wild.
Absolutely. We're getting, I would say, 80 to 90% of our hard facts from Twitter. Normally we got...
it's resourceful. Like our other unit... I'm assuming everyone over there is doing that.
Everybody.
It's not...
So, I'm talking from all higher levels, higher ranks and everything. And I get it. Cause
I'm assuming that the battalion that you fell under or the brigade or whatever had some kind of intelligence, personnel that they were... I'm sure they were scrubbing this, right? I mean, you probably got some yourself, but I'm sure
so we would have, word would go around, hey, there's this cell that's coming towards us, there's some guys that are planning an attack, you can see right here on Al-Jihadi website or, somebody's following on Twitter. And, 2 days later, everybody on the FOB knows. The next thing you know, you go in for a meeting, and they're like, hey, for the past 4 months, we know this person. So, our intel's been tracking for 4 months at least. Yeah, our actual intel guys.
Right, they're just not disclosing it to you until it's a threat.
Yeah, so which makes sense, because if you think of it, we all have laptops, we all have phones. You get, every now and then you're going to get that guy that shares stuff to home. And
it's not 2004 to 2006.
Yeah.
The technology creates a huge...
Offset break, I guess, because
not an offset break, but the potential for it. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, because
you got to think is we're watching them. What's stopping them from watching us?
Yeah,
I mean, they're watching us. They have the same thing we have. They have laptops, they have phones. The only difference is they have a higher motive. So I mean, I could see why they don't share it down. Plus, you don't want to scare people.
No,
because some people, just again, we had cooks that were there. You had people that. Never in their life did they think they would ever end up in a combat zone. Let alone now they're literally held by between them and the enemy. It's just a mound of dirt and some of us, So it can definitely shake things up. You also get guys, you don't want to spook too much because they get this mindset, family back home, which is the hardest thing you got to kick out of your head. So I can see why I wouldn't say holding, maybe they're just waiting to get all the facts or until it was relevant. Maybe they knew more hey, yeah, there are people coming here,
Right,
but we know.
or maybe there's people from another base that are going to go do a raid or whatever. And they obviously can't release things to you because there's another operation going on, and you're going to learn about it when it's about to happen, so you know what's happening, but you're not going to learn about it while it's planning.
So I mean, their job, like my job, is to be an infantryman. Their job is to do intel, and our person's job is to relay that out. And if they fit need for it, not to share it, there's a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this. I mean, deployments nowadays are wildly different than what we've kind of been told about, especially from a technology standpoint. I mean, we know a lot of it, and you hear about a lot of it, but you don't really realize how much they're using it until I guess you experience it. So, outside of so I guess outside of this liberation group, what was your with just local civilian interactions, like what was their perception of the presence of U.S. troops?
So this is interesting. I'm glad you got to it. So 10th Mountain we were a light infantry, so we did a lot of foot patrols. That was that is what the Missouri National Guard was doing, was just foot patrols. Mississippi had a striker. They had a bunch of strikers and they were rolling around in that. They were doing mounted. 10th Mountain was taking out these Max Pros, and they were doing mounted patrols, and they were going all over Syria. They were going up to the Turkey border. They were going to the Iraqi border. They were going in villages all the time. So they were out first before us, seeing all these cities and towns and villages, and they were coming back after every patrol. It seemed like, just with no fun at all. Like, the local population was not liking them. They were getting rocks thrown at them. They were not welcomed at all, which was funny because we were thinking that was going to happen with us. I can't think of a single village that I went to where we weren't welcomed. I'm talking like elders coming out to see you, kids everywhere happy to see you. You get a good amount. You felt. The scary part was you didn't realize till later. Like, you get very complacent. Like, you definitely, like us Missouri guys, we just carried ourselves. We just, it wasn't different villages because we'd go to the same villages as them, and we never ran into a problem. But 10th Mountain come back with busted up windshields, busted up windows. They would tell us.
So they really look at that patch, I guess.
I guess
on your left arm.
I rolled around with no patches. We made sure not to,
So I mean, how would they know that you were different from?
I guess maybe because the trucks is the only thing.
Okay, you were rolling around in different trucks or something like that. Okay.
Well, we every now and then, a few of my patrols, 4 of my patrols, I went out with 10th Mountain in their trucks. They were lower on guys. They just were getting burnt out, I guess.
Did they treat the civilian population differently than you guys did?
I would say, from what I saw, yeah. I don't know if it's a Missouri thing, or it's just because we.
Well, I mean, 10th Mountain would have soldiers from all over the country.
I think it was like the stability of the Guard of living an everyday life, working with a civilian population and a military population.
Okay.
I know when we come in, we were, we weren't.
You think your riot training might have, like all the riot training and experience from doing SEDs in St. Louis might have helped with that?
Maybe. We got lucky.
I mean, just knowing that you're dealing with people who are in a mental piece of unrest,
maybe.
Right? I mean, they're disturbed at what's going on. They're going to have emotional reactions because all people do when you have something going on that you don't like it. So I mean, when we deploy for the riots, we have to deal with that, right? We have to know how to try to bring the tone down without impacting what they are trying to accomplish.
I think what it was, some of the factors is our platoon sergeant again. He's in law enforcement, civilian life. Been in for quite a while, and our lieutenant is a pretty welcoming person all around, look-wise, tone, demeanor. So I think those two, which is weird, is they both would go out quite a bit together.
Okay.
Kind of scary when you have your PL and your PSG, your two hiring guys together.
Yeah,
but
typically you'd want to split them up.
But again, there wasn't that many of us, and
yeah, I mean, you guys are operating what, 38 guys?
36.
36, right? So
and then but you would leave. There's only 3 squads, and you would leave a squad behind.
Yeah.
So there's only 2 squads, so there's not many people. But another thing is that we would start, early in the morning. I'm talking like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. We step off. So by the time we had these villages, we time it to where, the sun is just coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe these guys are waking up, they're happy because they got some sleep, because that was a lot that we put into consideration before we even set up on these patrols. That, okay, you wake up, you had your cup of coffee. Oh, look, there's Americans on my front porch. Oh, wow, look at that. They're not banging on my door. They're not coming in with this loud truck. They're not pulling up security postures right in the middle of my city, because we kind of set up on the outskirts, and not really break us up. But we were definitely trying to be as tactical as could be to, pull security. But also we don't want to make it huge and widely known. Like, hey, we're taking you as a threat before we consider you a friend. I think we were definitely doing like, hey, we're here. Do you guys need anything? Do you guys, we're just coming through. Do you need, it seemed like we were there more to help. Is what I was. If I was in their shoes, I would say the presence that we gave off. 10th Mountain would definitely come in. The back of the truck would drop, and you would just get out really quick and pull security. I mean, it was as if you just dropped into a firefight. I mean, off the Getty. I mean, that's how they were running their patrols. And they were definitely walking around with a higher and like a harder demeanor with them.
Mm-hmm.
They would still communicate with the locals, but it was definitely more security first. Then, I could see as a local, I would be like, well, these guys are just trying to push me around. Is what I was kind of gathering.
Okay.
And that would be the best comparison of it.
And I guess that's probably just, the commanders, their commanders, I guess,
intent of things,
intent or interpretation of the environment can kind of play a huge role into that. So but it's and we know that different units get treated differently every time they deploy. It's to think that you're both getting treated so differently while you're both there at the same time. I mean, you hear about this unit leaves and a new unit comes in, and they have that left seat, right seat, and they take off, and then all of a sudden this unit that had no issues with locals, this new unit has all kinds of them. Yeah. That happens all the time, but
I would say maybe also I noticed with like 10th Mountain is that I was shocked by the first patrol I went with them, because you see them, we had a little chow tent, you just get in a big line, walk through. You'd see them in the gym every now and then, but you wouldn't really interact because everybody's constantly doing something.
Yeah.
But so when I went on the patrol with them, my first patrol with 10th Mountain, it was like the first time I got to like see them in the morning, interact with each other, joke around, how they would get their gear ready, how they'd plan for things. And it was weird because, in our unit here in Missouri, in the Guard, is that as soon as we hear something, we're planning on it, and we're working. It seemed like when we met with them in the morning, it was just unorganized. They would, they were forgetting fuel, they were forgetting food, they were forgetting water, they were forgetting litters, and it was kind of concerning because when I looked around, there was just nothing but brand new soldiers, and there was nobody, except for the two NCOs, they had an E6 and E7. Other than those two, and they had their commander with them. Other than those three, I think everybody was under the age of 20. And it was like their first deployment. You could tell they were just really young and inexperienced. And it was kind of concerning me because I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to be hopping along with you guys. And, I get this.
Well, they're the active duty force.
Yeah,
you're the Guard. You're doing this 1 week in a month, and they're doing this.
You get told that all the time, active duty's here, active duty's here. And, and then you come to realize, like, man, you guys are inexperienced. They're not well trained. You see them on their patrols. You're like, you guys aren't pulling, like, your sectors of fire. You guys are joking around. This guy's asleep. What is going on? So you learn, it was kind of like a wake-up moment where I was just like, I'm pretty glad I'm in the Missouri Guard and at least been training the way we've been training for the past, 11 years.
Do you think maybe you take it a little more seriously because they do this stuff every day, and then they figure out, like, they're like, oh, well, the only difference now is I'm actually under a threat versus you, like, come out of civilian life and go into this role and
I don't want to push any buttons in this statement, but I think what it is they get wrapped up in their head that, like, oh, I'm active duty, I'm untouchable, and I think they just get real complacent without, I mean,
I'm sure age plays into that too. I mean, when we were 20 years old, we thought we were indestructible too. It takes age to start realizing that, hey, my knees hurt when I jump off a truck.
Well, we had a pretty young fella in our that went over with us, and he had just turned 18 when we were pre-moving, and in our group, I'd say the most immature kid we had. But and I'm not trying to push buttons, but the comparison of maturity between him being our lowest, most immature person,
your youngest guy,
our youngest guy, versus their average soldier he was all-star compared to them. So I don't know if it's just complacency, the culture of it, but yeah, it was definitely kind of nerve wracking though, because you know, I'm in the back of a truck with these guys, and I'm not calling any shots at all. I'm just another person there on the patrol, and I'm like, this is kind of sketchy, you know.
Yeah.
Because because there was a few times I was like, hey man, like, you know, I remember one specialist, I was like, hey, wake the hell up, you know, what are you doing? You know, and then I was getting yelled at by their E7 afterwards. Like, why are you telling my guy what to do? You know, it's like
that territorial leadership aspect.
Which I get, but it's like your dude's asleep. Man.
There's we have general military authority.
Yeah. But it's like it was definitely weird. It was definitely weird on that. But.
So okay, we're talking about other units and how you guys act, but like, what about resourcing? I mean, did you guys have any better or worse resourcing being guard versus active duty? Did you have any issues with that?
So I would say when it came to gear or equipment and everything, I mean, whether you're Marines, Air Force Guard, full time or not, you're always going to complain about your gear because there's always something better on the internet. Oh
yeah, there's always something better on the civilian market than what the Army gives you. But
yeah, so before we stepped off, you know, we got all our gear and our new gear while we were at Fort Bliss, and you know, we're like, oh, this stuff is, you know, junk. I could get better at the 511 store, but yeah, when you saw what other units had, you're like, all right, like, you know, we have the same stuff. We have the exact same stuff, you know.
Right.
There wasn't, I would say, logistics-wise, though, we were definitely getting more.
And I mean, when you say junk, you're not talking junk like this thing's going to fall apart. You're just talking like it's not as comfortable. It's not. It may not be the most comfortable plate carrier that some ODF operator gets or something like that. But it's absolutely adequate equipment for what you're going into.
It's definitely, yeah. It's like I remember my new plate carrier, like what we had over there. I was more than fine with. I mean, it was beyond comfortable. Side plates suck though.
They're always uncomfortable. There's no way to put a square plate on your body on the side that.
But I mean, it's heavy equipment, period. But it's gonna stop a bullet in.
Right.
Appreciate it. But no, yeah, I wouldn't say junk at all. I mean, a lot of people, it's like the argument between AK and an AR. You know, people call it.
It's just not your preference, right?
Yeah, it's but I was more than fine with what we had. I mean, it could be way worse. It could have been way worse. But when it came to getting what we needed, I don't know if it was because our platoon sergeant and our lieutenant were just on it. But man, we needed something. They were fighting for us, and it would get it. And you got to think, we're in a whole different country, literally on the other side of the world, on a fob. It's not like we have a Amazon or UPS driving by us when we're getting airdrops for our supplies. And, sometimes, when you would order something off the Amazon, because a lot of guys were buying like both side stuff, to get there in a month. We make a phone call to relay to multiple, like active duty would have to make multiple calls, emails to get maps. It was used for example, and it would get there in 2 months. We'd make a phone call. Our guys back stateside were like, all right, we're on it. Just, give me a list. What do you need? When do you need it by? You're like, oh, I need it by tomorrow. Next thing you know, 3 days later, somehow this map would make it from Missouri all the way to the other side of the world, and it'd be there. So what we did need, we would get it pretty quick, comparatively, it'd take a few days.
Yeah.
But, I'd take, 3 days or a week over 2 months, no problem.
Oh, absolutely.
So
you had better resourcing than the active units.
I would say better resourcing. I would. I mean, you can be trying to argue that with an active duty. They're going to argue, but
right.
Last time I checked, we had everything. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot like I would like to have there. Like I'd like to have a jacuzzi, but
right.
But everything we needed to operate, we had. We definitely had all of our equipment that we needed. So I would say comparatively, we were definitely we were like the go-to guys. Like guys, our active duty guys coming into our tent, like, hey,
you guys can get this faster than we can. Can you?
I got some chew. Can you guys give us new batteries? Like we're running low on batteries, and it's like you guys didn't bring enough batteries. So, it was weird because we only had limited. We were told we only had limited space.
Yeah.
So we had 2 tough boxes, and that's where we decided to take one, and we were going to fill it up with like baby wipes, Q-tips, cleaning supplies for our weapons, board games, fun stuff. Like that was like our luxury box, and then our other box was extra batteries and stuff like that, engineer tape, duct tape, 550 cord, like the things we were going to need for the actual missions. And the other box was like our luxury box,
right?
And so we only had other than what you brought yourself. And again, you wish you bring an Xbox and a TV, but you only have a ruck and a duffel. And you remember, you're bringing clothes, you're bringing gear, you got to bring ammo, you got to bring your mag pouches, your extra magazines, your drums. You're bringing all that with you. So that box was all we had. And then active duty was given all of this, but all this space. And yeah, they still didn't bring anything. And it's just like, you guys not playing for this? And we were listening to active duty saying like, oh, it's impossible to get new supplies. You're never going to get new supplies over there. And we're like, oh, okay, we're not. And then we get there and we're getting our supplies and active duty's not. So it was kind of a cool flex to like look over at active and be like, oh, look, we got our stuff together.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't really understand that even though you're training 1 week in a month, I mean, the training is like you're prepared for what you're going into. You're
your best as you can.
As best as you can, and so like looking back, is there anything like what would you do to change the training that you received for that mission? Like, because I mean, we like there's obviously your daily training and your monthly training that you go through, but like we go through that spin up period.
I would say, and it's very I can't. It probably isn't relevant because I would say, man, I wish we trained every day our entire lives up to that moment, Right,
but I'm just talking like just that like 2 month period where you're really in that spin up, that pre-mob and mobilization.
I wish the most that we got out of it was the commander that we had just stepped away and let the lieutenants and platoon sergeants just teach your guys. Because we trained a lot of company size and we were not a company over there. It was one platoon at a time in Syria. And I really, and that's all across the board. I wish the commander we had just would let it, stop trying to showboat to his hires and just let us actually train. It was a lot of BS speeches and stuff like that. It was really irritating because you're going to a combat zone and yet you're spending all this time doing these checkbox BS stuff.
Sure.
It was really aggravating because we know what our mission was and we weren't training for a mission, and yet we're doing these ceremonies all the time. It's like, why are we doing these ceremonies? We're here to train. We only have X amount of time. Why are we not training? And we would train for scenarios that would never happen, and for sure never did happen. So it's like, why are we doing this? So there was.
I mean, even in the scenarios that you're training for, you're still training in like those same battle tactics, though, right? I mean, so
but it's.
It's just not exactly the same because you're training on a larger element.
You're training on a larger element, and you're trying to get I would say the hardest part was on the training belt. Primo was that I have these new privates that haven't, let alone been in this big of a training environment, or done these drills before, since they're just fresh out of OSET or basic, and it's like, okay, I need to teach you everything, but we're gonna do battle drill 1 alpha, we're gonna make it. I started coming down to simple terms like, hey. For those, I've been in your shoes. It's hard for you to understand what's going on.
It's a huge learning curve.
So I came with this thing. I'm like, when we do this, what are we making? I did L. So it became like after like day 2 of us doing it, I was like, what are we doing? And everybody's like, L. And I'm like, cool. Well, we go this way.
Coming up with your own hand and arm signals, your own SOPs, your own.
Well, more like a teaching before we do things. Like, okay, this is what it looks like on a board. This is how you're going to do it in person. Now we're going to take another step back and re-show it to you on a board to make it click. Because I'm ready to be in those shoes where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just know I got to be to the right of this guy. Because
on the basic soldier level, you really don't know anything, and you don't really start to learn how to run those kind of things and see it from a bigger picture until you get up to the higher level. Your job is your job, and you're that individual soldier who looks to the guy to your left and your right, and you just do exactly what you're trained and told to do, and that's it for the picture you see.
Yeah. So you go into a solid objective. Next thing you got a break contact. And that's like, now you have that new private or specialist that's never been in that situation. They're like, what do I do? I just know I got to be the right of that guy. But it's like, in theory, it's like, I need you over there, though.
Right. Well, I mean, that's why leadership is so important.
Yes.
We're the only army in the world that puts leadership down to such a low level, down to the team level, right? Yeah. I mean, you go to the British Army and their sergeant is their platoon sergeant. They don't really have. I guess when they move to certain operations, they probably have something that they put in place that they probably, mock from the U.S. Army, and things like that, but they don't, from like just an overall picture perspective from their formations, it's not the same. We're the only ones that put such high emphasis on that low a level of leader and put people in leadership positions from that, because we know the importance, because and it sounds to me like everything that you said sounds to me like you kind of, I mean, would you say have you read Extreme Ownership?
I've not yet. No.
You've not read it? Okay, yeah.
Heard of it,
I recommend it. It's
yeah.
it's fantastic. I mean, you can apply it to every single aspect of your life. I mean, Jocko does an amazing job on really like putting
it's Jocko.
parallel. It's Jocko, but he does a really good job at like kind of showing how it doesn't just work in military scenarios and settings. It really applies to all of your life. I mean, I even use it sometimes like as a father, you know. But so, you know, now that we're on the topic of leadership, you know, so you had been in E5, you've been in E5, or you got promoted to E5 in what, 2021?
2020, I think. I should know
okay,
that.
Like late 2020, early 2021,
yeah,
somewhere around there. You know, and so you've done this 1 week in a month thing. You know, you went through the Joint Reserve Training course down in Louisiana with Geronimo. Outside of that, you know, what did you have a whole lot of preparation for as far as like your leadership style prior to the deployment?
A few times in my military career, I'd step in as like a squad leader or a team leader, like when I was still in E4 as a specialist. You know, and that varies from all over, from, you know, previous squad leader being injured, or, you know, disciplinary, or just, you know, like, hey, we're going to see what Thone can do, you know, this drill weekend, or
but I mean, like outside of 1 week in a month and a course and a couple 2 week ATs, I mean, like, you know, outside of as far as military leadership, I mean, did you have a whole lot, or were you looking at more like did you kind of have to build that through your civilian career?
Honestly, I built most of it just in the military. Not all of it. The military has definitely given me the leadership capability. I mean, before, to be honest, when I was younger, all until I was like,
I mean, I know, man, yeah,
I was
10 years. I get it.
I liked living as a one man show. You know, I had this great, not a great, but I had this whole mentality of like, hey, if it's not my way, I'm going to do it because it works for me. You know, and you know, like I do better on my own, because if I have somebody that's less than me, it's gonna hold me back.
So then, initial reactions from a leadership perspective, right? I mean, how did you feel as a leader, knowing that you're going to have to go lead soldiers in combat? Like when you learned about your deployment, what was your like initial reaction to that? Like, were you?
I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty scared.
Scared?
It wasn't for my own being. It was I was definitely feared on my guys getting hurt.
Right.
And I think because of that, it definitely kicked a lot into gear. I would say, I mean, I think I took it a lot more serious. I kind of like slacked off, because you get pretty complacent being in the guard, because you're just like, oh, I had one deployment, probably not going to deploy again, you know. And then next thing you know, one comes up, and you're like, crap, you know, I need to even restudy. So I spent a lot of my personal time, you know, not shooting. Everybody thinks like, oh, did you go shoot? Did you go ruck everywhere? It's like, no, I studied as much as I could on tactics.
Right, I read books, tactics, I read so many books, and made sure that I knew everything that I could possibly know.
And I'm not one of those guys where I could just kick back on vacation and read a nice book. No, I'm going to be out fishing, you know? So, I was definitely cracking down on reading, and I was definitely cracking down on more, which sounds weird, but it ended up working for me, was more like mental philosophy with like how to connect, like putting yourself into somebody else's shoes. Because I think the best way to get your guys to learn is to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Where were you during this? What was your first time experiencing? How would you learn? What would you do different? What would you wish somebody did for you, knowing what you knew now? And I was trying because I knew that like there's no way I could take my brain and put it in theirs. There's just there's no way. If it was, then I'd be a multimillionaire, because I'd be training the best soldiers in the world, I think. That was a little broad. But so I was trying my hardest on how I connect to my guys, the approach to make a point like, hey, I'm your NCO, I'm your sergeant, I'm your team leader. I'm not messing around. When I say goes. And then I also wanted it to be to the point where, okay, I don't want to be sitting there with, you know, ruling with a hard fist. You know, I want to be able to, like, if you have a serious question, like, I'm your leader. and that's what I am. I'm a leader. I'm going to lead you to get you somewhere. I'm not here to yell at you. I mean, don't get me wrong.
There is a time and place where sometimes it can be warranted, right? But
yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain. I guess I'm trying to get to the word leadership. I was trying to find my leadership style, the style of a leader, and I came to the point where it ended up just working out for me, and I just kind of carry it now. Is that I just kind of do as an older brother, like aspect. You know? I think that worked at the position I was at then. Maybe I'll have to find a new one now after my promotion, but as a team leader, I think you should be like that stern 6-year-old, 8-year-old older brother, you know, like right between the boundary of being a father figure and brother figure. Mm-hmm. And I found a pretty good group that worked with my guys. You know, could have been different with a different group of guys, but with my soldiers, that's kind of where I fell into, and it worked out, I think, pretty well.
I mean, that's kind of the way that I always did it as a team leader. You know, a lot of guys get that bulldog mentality, and they just run, you know, and they go with it, and they're just hard charging nonstop, and you know, you find out that you burn your guys out so fast that way, you know, and I mean, that's kind of the way I built it too, you know, because I was promoted back in 2016, 17 when we were in Qatar, and you know, I inherited a team that I'd been on, which is kind of unheard of in the military, but I was the saw gunner with this team for years, and then all of a sudden, you know, the E5 that is supposed to be our team leader gets hurt, and they're like, "Hey, here's corporal stripes," and I'm like, "Oh, yay, corporal stripes, woohoo! I get more responsibility, same pay, yeah." But you know, I inherited this team of high performers, and I knew that I didn't need to necessarily teach them like what to do, because I knew that they knew it because I worked with them. But what they did need is someone who was going to be there for them, and like an older brother. And it worked really well, and we were an extremely high-performing team. We had the highest PT average, highest rifle qual average, best performance in the platoon. And then when I got my 5, about 3 months later, they wanted to change up the experience level across the team leaders and squad leaders in the platoon to make sure it was kind of like spread and fair. So they swapped me out with another corporal so that every squad would have a corporal, a sergeant, and a staff sergeant.
Spread the experience.
And I inherited this team that was the lowest performing team in the entire company. I mean, we had 2 PT failures, and we had an admin guy who volunteered for the deployment who wasn't even an infantryman. And you know, they didn't become the best performing team in the platoon by any means, but they had a bulldog, and then they got my style, and I mean, they all even admitted themselves, they were like, once I stopped getting yelled at all the time, and I started getting asked what I needed, and I started feeling like I could actually go talk to my leadership, they were willing to do the work. And it turns out that it's not that they were a bad soldier, and it's not even that maybe they had a bad leader, but they had a leader that did not want to help them perform and did not have the ability to provide them with purpose, direction, and motivation, right? I mean, that's really because that's the job of an NCO, right? It's purpose, direction, and motivation. We don't give orders. You know, we provide purpose, direction, and motivation, and we show them through example what they're supposed to be.
That's probably one.
And so you're developing this leadership style, and I mean, were you still developing it when you deployed, or had you kind of figured that out yet? Or like
I came up with a pretty good idea. So kind of kick back. I was physically not in good shape at the time. I just had my first kid. I wasn't working.
Dude, the baby weight's real. That sympathy weight is a real thing, and people do not. You don't think about that at all. And next thing you know, it's 3:00 in the morning, and your wife's asking for like a cheesy gordita crunch and McDonald's fries and a sweet tea, and you're like, "Man, I'm going to 2 different restaurants at 3:00 in the morning. Yeah. I'm hungry now because I'm smelling it." And it's not good for you, but she also wants you to eat it with her because she doesn't want to feel bad about eating it.
Well, then just kids in general, they eat so much. I'm gonna eat too.
And as a guy, if there's food in front of you, a lot of times you're like, I'm gonna eat it. Like,
I'm bored. I'm gonna eat. Yeah, like that's like.
That baby weight does a real thing to you, man. And in the military, it's rough because you gotta like. man, when we were in Qatar, I hit 230 plus pounds, and I was like 5% body fat. And then when I after my second kid was born, I was like 230 plus pounds and just barely making tape.
Yeah.
And luckily I kept it in bounds, but it was. I
that's
saw a picture of myself a little while ago. We were flipping through some old pictures.
And,
no, I mean, I wanted to. I was like, holy crap, I was fat. And I mean, that's me comparing myself to me. It's not like, but still, I was like, holy crap, what did I do? But yeah, so anyway, back to the topic, right? So, are you still developing your leadership style at the point of deployment, or had you figured that part out yet?
So I thought I figured it out. I was gonna go in, and I had a pretty diverse team, and I also never met any of these guys until right before we left. I had
you inherited a brand new team,
brand new.
Go on.
So we had I had one guy that just came into the Guard from the Marine Corps. He was infantryman over there also. Pretty younger guy though. Had already been to Syria back in 2016, 2017. I think. So probably around the time you and I were first deployed. So he had a little bit of experience of the area. It was I gathered though it was a lot different than it was now. It was kind of more of like, hey, we're here and sit down and do nothing.
Things change, yeah.
And I had another one. He was he's a wrestling coach for I think Farmington.
Okay.
So, and then the other one is just a 20-year-old kid,
right.
Turned 21 years old over there. He's just, hey, I'm just a weekend guy. I'm just want to be here. So, not a whole lot of experience was there. And these guys had never worked with each other. I never worked with them. They, first time they ever actually met me pretty much was just 2-3 months before that. So, I just took it to myself and I was like, I'm not going to try and figure out their background. I'm not going to try to see where they're going to fail. Like, I'm just going to teach them the basics. No matter what happens, you always at least have the basics to fall back on. So I was like, we're going to do the basics. And, I remember thinking I was going to teach them or have them do all this stuff before they left on their own time. And I was like, nah, one, I'm a huge stiff on that. If I'm not getting paid for it on orders, I'm not doing it.
Yeah,
and also
that's a joke. Yeah, you do feel like that. I mean, I remember I had a lieutenant that made us all write little one-page paper biographies about us
on your own time.
Yeah, well, I mean, not on our own time because you're there on the Army's time, but it's like you're in your bunk, and you're in mobilization, and you're sitting there with a homework assignment when you want to sleep.
Yeah,
because you're tired from training.
I'm talking about before we even were put on orders. A lot of these other team leaders, squad leaders were getting their guys to do all this stuff, and I was like, it's their time. They're
let them be with their families.
Let them be with their families. Yeah. Let them go joke and go do what they do at 20 years old, 21 years old.
Just don't get in trouble, right?
Yeah, that was that was the thing you have to do. You got to call them every night. You got to call them the next morning.
Yep.
Make sure you get to comes into now, but I didn't realize at the time I'm starting to slowly become like his father figure.
Mm-hmm.
So I told myself all right, we're gonna drill sergeant and stuff. We're gonna old school it. I'm gonna be right off the gate. I'm gonna be stern, everything to the T to the regs. I want extra this discipline like crazy. And when we first got to, we did a
So you went with the old Nathan Jones philosophy.
Yeah,
I did squash the ants so you can deal with the elephants later.
Yeah, we actually spent 2 weeks at Camp Crowder. No, I'm sorry, we did at where did we go? We went to Arkansas. Yeah, so we went to Arkansas 2 weeks the month before we left for Primo.
Okay.
So that was the moment where everybody found out who they're deploying with, who their squad is, who's their team, who's in what.
Right, because you guys fell into a completely different. You fell under Arkansas for your deployment, just a platoon out of Missouri.
Yeah. So we got there. We actually found out who our Joes are actually for sure, because it was still a toss up. We were still picking up pulling people,
Right. Because this was a pretty volunteer mission, right? I mean, it was kind of not, but kind of was.
Don't tell my wife that.
I meant there was a manning issue with Charlie Company, and so you had to pull some guys from other areas of the state that wanted to go.
Yeah.
And then there was some people who were in different situations in life that made it really hard for them to go, and so
they got to stay back. Yeah.
Right.
So. Yeah, so Arkansas, on the first week we were there, I kind of told myself that I'm just gonna stay back and just watch what these guys do. you know. And I remember just one day, I just got so I got so mad. All the NCOs and above, we went to a pistol call range, and we left it up to the Joes to. They were on the rifle qual, and they had a lot of downtime, and they were instructed by our PSG to train outside of that. You know, hey, I don't care what it is, I need some form of training. Well, next thing we know, we hop on Snapchat, and these guys are sleeping on the range. They're chilling out, relaxing. And I don't know what it was, but it set me off. Because all I could think of was, like, we just got told that people are, you're going to a real combat zone. Like, people are dying, you know? Like, there is an enemy out there, and you're spending the valuable time of training sleeping. So I remember when we got back, we got the bus, we met them at the barracks, and it took everybody out back. And I just drilled it out. I was beyond pissed. I was so furious, and it wasn't that like I hate you because you're lazy. It was like you
need them to understand the importance of the mission that's going on.
Like, this is your time.
This is not like what they were doing was not acceptable.
Yeah. So I had everybody out back, the other NCOs behind me, and I just kind of went on my my screen.
The rant.
Yeah. It was not a. Yeah, I was pretty upset. I was upset because I got to yell because I like yelling in the field. I like yelling, in real time.
when you're like when there's rounds going off and you're in training in that kind of aspect, you got to yell because you got to be loud enough. You got to be loud enough for them to hear you.
It's like
you got your ear pro on. You got rounds expending.
It's like your one time you get to be violent. Get all your stress out. But I hate yelling to my guys. Like, I shouldn't have to yell at you. And I was trying to pick my words there. So I think it was a good kicker for some of those guys because you could see in the face, like, okay. So after that day, I was like, you know what?
Well, they're still 20 and indestructible. You got to put it in their head that like you're going to be in danger when you're there.
You're an adult trying to make adult decisions, Yeah. And so I remember after that day, I told them that I wanted them to take the night, think about what I said. And in the morning, I remember just leaving it there. I said, tomorrow morning, we're starting our training. And sure enough, I'm in the morning. Joe's, I guess they got the point. They were perfect uniform. They had their gear laid out to the T. A lot of them spent most of their night getting their stuff ready to go train. We trained like crazy. I started seeing some bad habits from other, I'm not going to say what other guard platoon or units that were there. They were bad. They weren't teaching like right things at all. And I just remember always constantly pulling my team away, and I was like, nope, we're gonna go train over here. And then I'd have some other high rank. What are you guys doing? Like, I'm training my guys. Like, I don't care. Some of that's not even in my chain of command. And I'm like, yeah, we're just not gonna do that. Like,
now, you guys spent 6 months in Syria, and you spent 3 months in Kuwait. But there's 3 platoons in a company, so like you guys were. We
were there the longest of all the platoons. So
do you think that
only one platoon? Or only 2 platoons. Our platoon and one other were in Syria.
So do you think that the way that you trained your guys and the way that you made sure that discipline and all of these important things were realized, do you think the command saw that and maybe that's why you guys got left there so long? Because they knew that you could handle it?
It was never said, but I'm going to say yes because when we were constantly, Missouri was just out training and we were training and we got very lucky with the NCOs that we did have and the leadership that we did have in Missouri because we had a lot of knowledge. I mean, from each and every single squad leader, our platoon sergeant, our team leaders, all the NCOs, and our lieutenant. I can never stress enough how awesome Lieutenant Hampton is. We were just training, and it was real training. It was common sense training. There was no like, because you can what if you hear it all the time. You can what if all day. It's like, no, you're going to do this. We're going to start here. You're going to crawl
crawl, walk, run. Yeah.
Like, no, we're going to crawl. All right, now we're going to walk. And then we're not even going to run. That's, if you, again, falling back to the basics. So we train pretty common, like, it's best common sense that you can get. They, what do they call them from the cadre that come down that evaluate you while you're training?
The First Army guys.
Army guys. They're, I can't remember what they're called. Something that I've realized in my life that nobody ever talks to those guys. Arguably, some of the most experienced people.
I remember seeing that.
So, like, I mean,
you were just a Joe in the last deployment, but like, we still went through combat checkpoints, even though we were going to a relatively safe area for our last one. But like, and I was just a corporal, but you still, got that team leader. So you're in those after action reviews with the First Army evaluators, and the Joes don't see that, so, but yeah, I noticed people would argue with them rather than just asking them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking every second we had. Eventually, I remember after the first few days, those guys were, because there's like 12 of them, and they're spread out throughout the unit. That's the point. By the end of the first few days, almost all those guys are with us, and there was kind of like a realization, like, all right, we have all these guys, we have 12 super experienced men, who have been there, done it, spent plenty of years. Like, you have like 100 years, possibly, not even 100, but yeah, like 50 years worth of combat experience right here. We're gonna pick their brains, and that's what we did. I mean, it kind of looked a little more childish, because I was just asking them a million questions, but we were just like, what do you do?
But there are no stupid questions.
Yeah, like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Now, how do you do, what would you do? What's the best route? What works for you? What worked for you? What have you seen with other units has worked?
Right.
And those guys were awesome. If I ever go through that again, I'm making sure that I'm start grabbing team leaders, I'm grabbing Joes. And that was another thing I had my Joes, like, ask these guys questions, and I had one my Marine guy who was...
They're here to evaluate us. Asking questions is how we make sure that we, one, we pass the evaluation, and two, that we are prepared when we hit the ground.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. So, I remember I had one of my guys who, again, came from the Marine Corps, and he was trying to do the whole story swap thing. And I was like, hey, man, he doesn't care about your story. Like, just because you went somewhere cool, nobody cares. Like, anybody can go to Afghanistan, anybody can go to Iraq, anybody can go to Syria. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you're a good soldier. So, I remember, like...
Right, it just means that you were there.
Which is fine. I mean, I get it. You meet somebody, you're excited. Like, hey, you've been there doing the same thing as me. But I remember I, stopped him a few times. Like, hey, man, no. Like, if you're not going to talk to him about getting better, because that's what they were here for, I don't want you talking to him. Mm-hmm. And then, awesome. Something he also wasn't used to is like a team leader, like, not screaming at him. You remember him telling me that too. He's like, yeah, I've never, outside the Marine Corps, he was like, your only idea is kind of helping me. It's like, always been on my own. So, like, next thing I know, I started seeing him like, hey, is this the way you would do it? And it was cool watching my guys progress with those guys. I think those guys definitely kicked up the experience level on my team so much faster. So kind of kicked off there for a bit, but I just want to stress how awesome those guys are from First Army. Like,
yeah,
they're not.
I mean, there's a reason that they end up with that job.
Yeah,
there's a reason they get that assignment.
Well, because you see a lot of leadership, like, oh, they're over here, great, everybody do this.
They're going to critique everything that we do.
You shouldn't have to put on a show for them. You should be
just doing what
you're so good and so well trained that you shouldn't have to worry. You should be like, hey, come over here, check this out. You should be happy they came over, because one, they're going to tell you what you did wrong. That's the only way you're going to learn. You got to be.
That's the only way you're going to learn.
It's like,
you learn so much more from failure than you do from success.
Yeah.
So much more. So I'm glad that you guys trained the way you did, because I do know that command sees those kinds of things, and I do think that that's probably part of the reason why you guys got left there longer.
So yeah, when we did our lanes, that's why I bounced off around. When we did our lanes, or like actual evals, we were quickest time. Zero, like, I can't say zero error. There's always error somewhere, but we were just so fluid with everything. Our communications, our lethality.
Right, but you had the fundamentals.
Yeah, we were. I think possibly, it never was said out loud, but I think possibly that's kind of why. Because when you looked at everybody else, because you watch every other group before you and after you go, you're kind of like, what the hell? Like, you guys were here the same amount of time as we were, and then you're like, all right. And maybe that's what it was, or also maybe because we were the outsiders, and they're like, we don't know what to do this outside platoon. Like, man, we'll just give them, make it happy, like, hey, here's this cool deployment. And we're like, all right, we weren't. I mean, I don't. Until the end.
I guess we'll never really know, right?
We'll never really know. Yeah.
So I want to fast forward a little bit to actually adapting to the combat, right? So you've kind of put together this leadership style, over the part-time service, and then throughout figuring out what your Joes needed, what your guys needed, because that changes your leadership style too. Yeah. It doesn't really change like your overall philosophy, but it definitely changes the demeanor in which you approach people. So fast forward, you've been in Syria for a while, and you guys take that first round of IDF, and then you start actually experiencing real combat. How'd you adapt your leadership style to meet the demands of that?
So I know it sounds weird, and my answer is the way you're not looking for. The first IDF one was an experience on its own, personally.
Sure, right. I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah,
it's your first experience too. It's not just theirs.
Yeah. When you feel that like full on concussion on your whole body of that blast, and it's dark. It was dark. It was like 2 a.m. like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was just like, oh. And here I am barefoot holding my M4, and that's it. And I was just like. Well, I had my kid.
Just the depiction of the guy like running out in his boxers and flip flops with a kid on.
I had my PT shorts on and my kit, and I had my helmet, but I had my kit and my rifle, and I was barefoot. Because we just heard the siren. It was like it was like incoming, and they just told everybody to get the hell up. We ran to the bunker outside, and I remember before I was like halfway to the bunker, and the first round hit. And I was just like, ah! I didn't think I could run any faster. And but right after, you kind of get wrapped up in this moment, and then reality hits you like, hey, I still have a job to do. We need to go. Like, we got to go post up on the towers, and like on the perimeter of the fob. And I remember I had one of my guys with me, and another guy that was in our platoon that was in the bunker I was in, and the rest was 10th Mountain. And they're on the intercom, calling QRF, calling medics, calling everybody. And I remember, because you kind of like, what was that? There was a study about a fire alarm. Like, if you take one person that was like part of a study, and the rest were all in the study, and somebody pulled the fire alarm, and that person got to leave the building, but looked around and then sat back down because nobody else got up. I think I got wrapped up in an effect like that, because I looked around, I was like, why isn't 10th Mountain moving? They're calling us. And then finally just hit me. I was like, all right, well, I gotta go. And then so as far as I know, like that day, I don't think 10th Mountain ever left that bunker, but so, it's middle of the night, we really haven't, baseball, like fob wise, we haven't really done that big of a drill, like on something like that. Cause something like that's happened like one time in the past, like 3 years, has that place even got hit.
Yeah. I mean, it was even in Afghanistan, we hadn't had, real casualties in a long time until we pulled out.
But then, so yeah, I remember I ran into the tent real quick. I tried to get accountability of my guys as we're moving. I'm trying to get my gear. I'm trying to mentally figure out where my guys are at as best I could, because we kind of spread out. I'm taking like little mental notes, like how can I improve it next time? How can I improve it next time? And also I'm like, where are my guys? My only job is to make sure these guys are still alive and they can function and carry out missions. And so, I'm concerned, they're like my kids, so I'm like, where the hell, where's this one? There's this one. Cool. Hey, you're going to probably need pants. Well, am I going to need pants? Like, you're going to get a firefighting shorts? It's going to suck,
Fighting the holy war in shorts? Bold move, man.
Yeah, just like, yeah.
There was 13 hours.
100% took that from the Hollywood and stuck with it, because it is true. Because I did, that day I was wearing PT shorts. I never got dressed in my pants, and I was running, and I definitely, it's definitely just dirt and rocks over there. But the cool part of this, well, I was getting at though, the coolest part, we hopped in the back of this little Toyota truck, and there's next thing we know, here comes our platoon sergeant and another squad leader, Bonzi and Blasky. They come pulling up in this little Toyota, and Bonzi thought it was like the coolest thing. It was like he was never would stop talking about it the whole deployment. Probably doesn't stop talking about this day, because from his perspective, this uncle. He pulls up this 30 seconds to a minute after, after like the last round hit. And he said in the middle of the night, all you see is just these dudes amped up with all their kids, ready to go. And we're already where we're supposed to be. And he said, there's nothing cooler than pulling up thinking you don't know how your guys are going to react. And he's like, and all your men are ready to go. And, man, we all fought to get on that truck. There was like 20 of us on this little Toyota Hilux. I mean, that's just, I'm not kidding. I remember I hopped on the back. And, I mean, literally the tailgate was, like, almost sliding on the ground because that suspension was gone.
That's awesome.
But, so we're running, we're hauling up. We're trying to post up because, what we do is we'll attack somewhere with IDF, and then we'll, come attack you on foot. So we're rushing. Also, first time most of us have ever been in contact, period. Mm-hmm. And I remember I get off the trucks, I'm, like, on the tailgate. Bonzi's like, no, Thone, I need you down here. I need somebody, trying to pick out more experienced guys. Like, hey, I need somebody more spread out. I can't have all of you there. And then, because I was going to get up in this tower, and I was like, okay, well, I'll go down this way. And then I turned around, and I realized, like, half that truck is following me. And not because they don't know where to go. Like, they were like, I want to go to Sergeant Thone. And I was like, kind of a cool moment for me. And so I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to go this way. And then I saw, somebody, Bonzi was like, no, go to the other one. I was like, oh, okay. And I turned around, the same thing. Everybody's just kind of herding around me. And then I had to take a moment. I was kind of like, my head got pretty big, Right. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And they hit me. I was like, all right, I need to
Nope. Hang on. You got to be a leader now.
I got to delegate this. Like, hey, you guys, this, there, who is that? Take a mental note. Also, like, who's going over there? Because because team leader, everybody's starting. The chaos is starting.
You got to keep accountability.
You got to keep accountability, and you don't want to hop on comms because I'm sure that thing's going to go crazy. So I'm trying to delegate as best I can. And then next thing I know, I was like, okay, I got 2 other guys. Let's book it. And next thing I know, we're running like 600 meters down this fucking straightway on 5 open area, and we're just hauling, and I'm just trucking along, and you hear another impact, and just zoning, I'm like, we're getting there, like, because in my mind, I'm like waiting for somebody, I'm waiting for like a zombie apocalypse to be out there, like,
right,
and so I remember
you're expected to come up over on top of the tower and just see this wave of incoming soldiers.
But I remember we get to this tower, and I got my squad leader with me. I have 2 of my Joes with me, and another guy that's on our squad with me. And so I'm like, okay, cool, everybody's here. I'm trying to delegate. 2 of them have a saw, and I was like, hey, post up on the saw here, because it was just like an unmanned tower. And I was like, get the saw here. This, try and get the direct fire, telling them relay. Like while I was talking, I was like, if you see something, I was like, tell me now. Trying to see what we got with us, and then I'm kind of looking at Carmen. He's kind of like, dude, this is cool. And then I realized, I was like, I don't have my radio, because I had to hand it off, and we don't have radio in this tower. I looked at him, I was like, you have a radio? He was like, no. And I'm like, bro, what? Like, what are we going to do, And then I was thinking, I was like, maybe I'll run down the next tower, But then it hit me, I was like, dude, my luck, I'm going to run and get blown up, or... Like, I'm safe in this little tower. Not really, but, But then I also thought, like, man, I'm going to run all the way down there to get on the radio for them to tell me something I don't know. I have to run all the way back. So, but yeah, we sat in that tower by ourselves for, about an hour and a half. The next thing we know, here comes 10th Mountain finally. And they were like, and we're joking, we're laughing, we're telling stories and stuff, still pulling security, but we're having the time of our life, like, it's just another day at work pretty much at this point.
Right.
10th Mountain comes up, they're shaking and all this other crap, and we never found out the dude's rank, and but we were definitely joking back with this. Apparently, he said, my sergeant said, so we know, so it's E5 to E7, that's the only thing I can think of.
Right.
They told us to take things serious and to quit joking and get pull security. Well, he yelled it to my guys, so I got pretty pissed off. So we're up in this like 2-stack HESCO kind of barrier, and they're in this Max Pro, and I just like turned around and his tone was like, "Go fuck yourself." She said,
"It's all right."
It got real quiet, and then you could just hear, "They need to take this serious." I don't know, they're not taking this serious, and I could think of it as like, "Man, you've been gone for an hour and a half now." And you're so scared,
well, and just because you're not in this like
scared throttle like position, it's like you're just.
It doesn't mean you're not taking it seriously. Yeah. It's the way you're. Well, it's the leadership style, right? I mean, it's the leaders and the way they prepare them. You've got this relationship with your guys where you can still get the job done exactly how it's supposed to be done. But you don't need to have them wound up like a spring. That's just going to make it worse.
So later that night, so we get to all clear finally. It's like 2 hours since last impact. It's all clear. We get back. I grabbed the group I was with, met up with a few others, and I was like, "Hey, everybody, stage here till we figure out where everybody's at. We get accountability. We go to meet up with LT, give her a report up, kind of go over what happened, get back to the tent." Walk in, everybody's high-fiving. "Yeah, dude, awesome," and they kind of looking at me, waiting for more information. I was like, "I'll go back to sleep," you got work here in a few hours. Mm-hmm. So later, 2 hours later, sun's about to come up. We're going over a brief for the day with 10th Mountain, and I remember me trying to align things. There's a Z6 there with a drill sergeant badge from 10th Mountain, and he was talking about kind of gives us like a heads up, like, hey, this is what happened while you guys weren't around work. This is what's going on around the region. This is what's changed. And I remember he said, so by now everybody knows what's going on, right? And I was like, yeah, it was a really crappy drill, trying to be funny.
This is a joke, right?
Dude did not think it was funny at all. Dude lost his mind. He was telling him, he's still shaking, and he's like, "Oh, you need to take this serious." Looks over at Bonzi, and he's like, you need to take this serious. And Bonzi's like, you need to calm down. You know what I mean? And he was like, and of course I couldn't help but make another joke. And I was like, I'm not scared, you're scared. But I'd said it too loud. And he was like, what? And I was like, oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
So,
Whoops.
so I just kind of hid behind the groove and I was like, I will let it go, you know? And, but then we had a talk, and then Bonzi came out with it pretty, because he's been in shootings as a cop, like, quite a bit.
Well, yeah, he was undercover for a while, wasn't he?
Now he's in SWAT.
Right now, but he was. Like,
Yeah.
I remember he was undercover.
And, but he was talking about, like, hey, he's like, 10th Mountain wants me to get on you about that. He's like, I'm not. He was like, they're scared, like, completely. I'm trying to watch my language here. He's like, you know, they're freaking out. They're not used to this. And I was like, well, I'm not used to this. And he was like, I know, but he's like, I don't see a problem with you joking about it. He's like, you know, it's not like you're not taking it serious. He's like, you're clearly taking it serious. He's like, the fact
It'd be a different thing if you weren't doing your job.
Yeah,
and you were slacking off.
What he says is like, if you can't process it, and he's like, which is fine. He's like, some people just can't. But he's like, the fact that you can process it and still be chill about it and still be coherent. He's like, it's just showing me that it's fine. He's like, it's just making me lose a lot of faith in these guys that are supposed to be
these active duty soldiers,
crazy soldiers that are completely scared out of their mind every time we get hit.
They're also young, though.
Well, this one was, again, he was E6, had the drill sergeant badge on him, had a different combat patch from a different unit. So he was probably, I don't know, at the time, he was probably early 30s.
Okay.
So like, he's been around the
about our
block.
age.
So, yeah. But yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, it sounds like you adapted pretty quick under pressure, you know, but, I mean, maybe you just had it in you. Who knows, right? But that's a good thing, right? It's a good thing for your soldiers to know, especially to see, you know, and it is a double-edged sword, right? I mean, it's a good thing for your soldiers and a bad thing at the same time when they see you dealing with your first experience, and then like maybe they're not coping as well. So like, I'm sure you made sure to check on how they were doing, but like, how well did your soldiers deal with it compared to how you did?
Well, kick it off with what you said with it. That was my first thought, because I had a moment. It was just all, you know, NCOs and up, team leaders and up, and we were, you know, talking about things, and it kind of hit me. I was like, man, you know, I'm in the same boat as my men, and I don't need them to know. You know, they don't need to think first. Like, you know, this is Sergeant Thone's first time also, because then it puts us on the same level. So I'm still trying to stay above it. Mm-hmm. So that was hard. So I was trying to come up with a way of like, okay, how can I just act super chill like this never happened? You know, like give off that persona. So if I did end up meeting up with them, I mean, I met up with them in the morning, you know, because we lived in the same tent, which is weird. I don't think leadership should be in the same tent as Joe's. But I didn't talk to them in the morning, just made sure they had their gear, checked them, they went off to their thing.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I did have a talk with them. When we got back to the tent, I came up with my new awesome philosophy on life, that if you have time with your Joes, you play Monopoly, period. Monopoly was our thing in our tent. We all played Monopoly. We all wanted to kill each other multiple times at deployment over Monopoly, but it gives you a lot of time to talk. It gives you a lot of time to control. Right. Like, you know how you give each other crap, you know, like you kind of pick on each other. So like you can delegate that though, because everybody's going to do a deal in Monopoly. It was like my strategic to get them to talk, relax, vent a bit, but also if it gets too rough on each other, you can do a trade or something to take it off, deviate off of this guy onto that guy. So yeah, Monopoly became like our thing. So, but that's how I brought it to my guys. But they took it pretty well though. I'm not gonna lie, like I didn't really have any thoughts beforehand on how they would react. You know, I always thought when you think contact, you think like direct contact, like 50 feet away from each other in a village or something. But I never thought about something like that. But yeah, they took it great. They were just like, yeah, man, can we get chow? You know, like,
I'm hungry.
You know, you gonna sell boardwalk or what's up? Like, you know, they took it pretty well, and you know, and I told them what they did right. I told them what they did wrong, which really didn't do anything wrong. You know, it kind of became like the teaching lesson, like, hey, like, you know, from now on until things kind of cool off, maybe we should sleep in our pants. You know, this is why.
We sleep in our pants.
Yeah, but on a real note, I was telling them like, hey, this is why you need to have your gear laid out at all times. This is why you need to know where you're at all times. And it was kind of cool. We definitely got, because it built up, the text built up while we were there. Because we went from nothing to a little bit more, and then it just saw what you saw in the news. You know?
Right.
So I got lucky on that because it was a good like reality check for them. Like, hey, this is where we're at. This is a real combat zone. This is why Sergeant Thone tells me what to do every day. This is why he has it this way. And it worked for me because now I'm like, okay, now I saw all the wrongs and I get to fix them.
Well, and I'm sure, I'm assuming it sounds to me like you saw it click in their head, like, this is why we trained the way we did compared to everybody else.
And that was like the chase, I think that's the chase at every NCO, unless you just get lucky with like the guys that have it already. But I think that's like the hardest thing that was for me to that point. That would probably answer the question of the day that was the hardest, is getting them to realize like, hey, I know you think you know that it's a dangerous place. And I think you know that you think you know why I tell you to do things. But like then that was the moment where it was like there was no second guessing on what the hell I said. There was no, gripes, complaints. They were just on it after that day. I mean, There was nothing wrong with them.
I mean, I think that it says a lot that, at that point they learned that, holy crap, Sergeant Thone has our back and he's doing the things that he knows needs done to prepare us for this. And now we were prepared. And I'm sure they noticed the difference between the other units on the ground. Like, these guys were obviously not as prepared as we were. Okay, now I get it. Right. I mean, that's one thing that, like, so many people, I mean, you remember how many people were terrified to be in Sergeant Jones' platoon back in the day.
Oh my God!
Like, people would turn down promotions
because
they didn't want to go to that platoon, and like I
don't want to be coach.
I came into that platoon like right off the go. I didn't know anybody. That was my first platoon in the infantry.
Beard.
Well, right.
That dude.
Yeah, but I mean, but so me though, like, that's all I knew.
Yeah.
And then when he got promoted and he went over to Charlie Company, all of a sudden he becomes this beloved NCO of all these guys who were terrified. Like, they heard that he was going to become their first sergeant, and were like, "Oh crap!"
Best first sergeants I've ever had.
But yeah, one of the best leaders I've ever had in the entire Army. I mean, I still to this day, like, I still talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I end up in this other leadership because he got promoted and left. And I remember I was like, I got really lucky. I had moved to Cape, and the commute to drill was long enough that I could call it a hardship.
Mm-hmm.
And so but I spent, I mean, I'm not kidding you. I spent one weekend under different leadership and was like, screw this. Yeah. I'm hard shipping, and I transferred over to Charlie Company to follow him. and like, because but I had learned through the deployment that, like, seeing the performance of us versus other units, when you have a leader that, sometimes you think that they're hard on you.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's not the same kind of hard on you that is bad.
Yeah.
You hate it until you actually see the culmination of things that were done and how
it's just like,
envelops the way that you behave and the actions that you take and the things that you do right. And you're like, and I still to this day, like I'll look back and in comparison, even evaluate things that I do versus other people that are at the E7 level now. And I'm like, that correlates all the way back to me being a private under that leadership. And that has changed the direction of my career and my leadership style and the way that I perform. Even today, right, 12 years later, almost 12 years later, it's mind-blowing to see how much of an impact one person can have on your career in a good way. And so, having that style is not a bad thing. It's it's what inspired this entire podcast, right? He didn't yell, like, ever. People always looked at him and like, they always thought of him as yelling because he was being hard on him, but like, it wasn't ever actually a yell or a scream or anything. Even if even back in the old days when you could still smoke people, and just you'd be doing push-ups for an hour and a half in like the old Army days. And like, if we did it, there was a reason. I mean, we were talking the other day, like you came on the bus back from Wyoming, and we all had our arms up, and you're like, "Why am I doing this? What's going on?"
It's like to be with your bus.
You know, you're supposed to be on our bus.
And I know, so everybody, we all have our arms up. An hour and a half later, he's like, "Who the hell are you?" And I'm like, "From Trolley Company." He's like, "Oh, my bad, dude.
You don't have to do that.
Yeah, you can put your arms down. You're good." And I was like,
but like we did that because people lost extremely expensive, sensitive equipment.
Yeah,
and
I didn't
you didn't know it.
Just the other day.
You didn't know until just the other day, right?
That's how you guys rolled.
Yeah, but like it was a, and it's not to say
hours.
that kind of punishment is like maybe right or wrong. It's old Army, that's for sure. But
now it teaches you to check your guys, though.
Yeah, I learned real quick how important all that stuff really was. But but that's the different times. But still, going back to those days, I still would prefer to be under that kind of leader than anything else because I know how much it really does affect your performance in a good way. If someone is strict, but not mean, right? Not angry, not vindictive, not they see themselves as a leader and they take ownership of everything that happens. They don't just. It's the same thing back to extreme ownership. And reading that book, I saw a lot of parallels in that too.
I read that book.
It's absolutely. But so let's look at like learning from mistakes. What can you share that like was a mistake that you learned from, and how did you handle like the setbacks and failures as a leader, and then in turn?
So there was one thing that I would change that I would definitely work on. So I do think that you should show your men, especially in a stress environment that we were in, that you're also human. There's times, but you got to figure out when to show that you're human. Like I didn't like talking to my wife, FaceTiming my wife and my daughter in front of my guys, like at all, because it's emotional for me, and I don't want them hearing what my life is outside the military, while we were there.
Right.
But there's also times where just, we were, 10th Mountain was just on us and giving us like the worst details and stuff, and, up to a certain point, you just got to let them know, like, hey man, because they're hating life. You got to look at them and be like, yeah, this sucks. I think this sucks. This is horrible. I'm miserable right now.
Right.
You gotta like let them relate. Like, okay, I'm not the only one. Like I'm glad he sees it.
Right. And the military has a way of like your gripes. It was Saving Private Ryan. You only gripe up the chain.
Yeah, you never gripe down.
You never gripe down. And a lot of people take that as they don't need to see that I'm human, and they don't need to see that I'm bothered by this. It's not that.
So
it's not that you can't show them that you're also human. It's that you don't want to gripe about things that are happening above their level that you can't control.
So
it doesn't mean that you cannot let them see that, because knowing that you're struggling and pushing through it is a whole nother animal than this guy is just an animal.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother like level of understanding for your soldiers that like it is okay for them to see you struggle a little bit, because them seeing you push through that makes them feel like, well, hey, he's struggling and he's doing it, so me struggling means that I can still do it.
Yeah.
And that is a thing that a lot of people have a hard.
So I was really screwing up there though, because I'm not gonna lie, it got to me. I got, just
got a big head when you saw everybody following you.
Well, it wasn't that. Eventually, you just see what's going on, because you, as a team leader, I think team leaders are probably the most important thing in infantry, because you're living both lives. You're living a leadership life, but you're also doing all the Joe stuff.
Mm-hmm. You're still part of the workforce.
Yeah, if Sergeant Vineyard says it to the T, first Sergeant Vineyard, I'm sorry, says it to the T, he said it's the hardest job in the military is being an infantry team leader, and I 100% agree. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I don't want to do it. It is. It's frustrating. I mean, physically is one thing. By then you're still young enough. You've been used to it. But mentally, because you just see all the wrongs that go on. I'm not saying everything's wrong 24/7, but if you do see a wrong, you get to watch it go from here and go all the way down. And then
because you're in that conversation with leadership, and you're the one relaying it to the Joes.
And then you see all the problems happening here, because I do. Lieutenant Hampton says it the best. He said, "There's no such thing as an officer, a great officer." He was like, you only get good officers and good platoons. I'm sorry, there's no such thing as like an officer that makes a great platoon. He's like, the platoon is what makes the officer great. It's like if your guys,
right.
If your guys are doing like awesome and take care of you, he's like, that's what makes a great platoon leader. And I was, I kind of thought about that. I was like, oh, that's true, and he does. And that's why he had his style of leadership, and he just did everything for us. I mean, not like, hey, can we get pizza? I'm talking like he'd fight for us. If you were in the right, he would fight for you. If you needed something, he was fighting for us. And then in return, like, hey, this guy, kind of like a dog with the human, like, hey, you feed me, I got you. Something comes right. So it's how you make such a strong bond. Maybe a weird analogy on that, but that's how.
I mean, I get what you're trying to say. When you know that your leaders fight for you and fight to make your life better, it completely changes what you're willing to do for them.
Yeah. So I got to a point where I was, just mentally getting there. I was, it was kind of tough watching, my family through a computer screen. You see, there's these really bad guys just down the road, and you can't go get them. And then you just see, you just see everything that's going on there. I'm trying to really pick these words here. So it got to me, and the next thing I know, I started venting because I do tower shifts with some of my Joes, and I'm just like, man, I can't wait to get home and do this. This is dumb, and I'm stepping way over that boundary of now I'm like complaining to my guys.
Right now, you are griping about stuff that's going on up here.
I'm griping about everything, and then I remember Bonzi, platoon sergeant would come in a lot. So would our PL Hampton, and they would come in, and I would just I would talk to them like I would behind closed doors, but now I'm doing it in front of my Joes. And, and they're pretty, I got lucky enough to let, my leadership let me be so lax with them, which again, I feel like worked out better. That was like their style, which is fine. But I was really breaking that boundary because I'm doing it right in front of my Joes, and I'm just like realizing, I'm like, I don't care. In that moment, I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to tell you what's up, and I was just stepping way over that. And it wasn't until the end of us getting ready to leave, I caught myself, and I was like, damn, man, like damage is already done, and then I started seeing their demeanor, and I was like trying to get back on that, but now that mindset, that down morale had spread like a disease. I think morale, I heard that, I don't know who told me that the first time in my life, but they said, negative morale, morale going down is a disease. It just, negativity just spreads everywhere.
So it festers.
And you will never be able to get it back. You can, but it is so hard. And I remember just watching, everybody turn miserable, and I think it was like, man, I did that. Like, whether it's true or not, that's how I took it till to this day. I'm like, I just killed everybody's mood over just a few words, So it's kind of a thing. If anybody ever hears it, it's like, don't ever vent like that in front of your men ever. It is. You know what? You just kind of do the man thing. You just suck it up, and you wait until you get home and bang it out.
Well, or you vent to your leadership behind closed doors where they're not going to see it.
There's a time, place, and manner, and that's
yep.
Yeah, that's probably my biggest screw up. I personally take to this day.
Those 3-word combinations go far away, right? Purpose, motivation, and direction, and then time, place, and manner. It's two things that you have to learn very quickly as a leader. So
common sense, got the common sense in there.
So it's a combat environment, so you're always employed.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to make sure that you're developing your soldiers too, right? So what did you do to support their development while you were there?
We went over finance. We went over financials. That's probably the biggest improvement that we worked on. I know you're probably thinking maybe we did some cool stuff, tactical. No.
I mean, anything as far as personal development and things like that.
Once I found out their financial situation and their future goals, which weren't there, it was finance though. I'm talking some horrible, horrible financial settings was going on. A lot of them got in, and their finances got better after they joined the Guard. So it scared me because it's like, you were 17, 18 years old with horrible finances as is. So they're like, yeah, well, I joined the Guard because it helped me out a bit. I'm like, okay, well, you still need some push in there. So finance was a big one. Saving their money and not buying a whole bunch of tactical gear that they weren't going to use. One of my guys bought so much gear through Amazon that most of it he didn't even get until he got back to the States, so it made no sense. But finances, I went over finances with them, helped two of them pay off a car. They weren't happy with me when they came home. They didn't have $30,000 cash, but they had a car that was paid off and saved them probably one of them.
They have an asset now.
One of them, I'm not kidding. I probably saved him like $12,000 through a car payment alone because.
Well, and now he has an asset that's not. It's no longer a liability because he's not paying for it.
Well, now one of them is completely debt free, to my knowledge, unless he did something else to this day. He's completely debt free. Has a great job. Gets to hang out with his kid. Has a great life. Just saw him the other day. Met him up at a bar, having a great time. He's looked good, staying in shape. Met a nice gal. So
good.
But yeah,
it's nice seeing the people that you led.
It's pretty nice looking over it. Well, it kind of gets you because you're like, damn, you're doing too good. You really got to lift 2 times a day every day.
So what qualities do you believe that are essential being a mentor?
You gotta be able to laugh with your guys. I think being a good storyteller or a good joke, like you're good at telling jokes, like you could zip breaks. I think you have to have a good balance. You have to be your NCO. You're already a leader. You have to be the leader position. Mm-hmm. But again, we lived in the same tent, so I knew there's no way I could do this. There's no way. It's a whole year. I'm not going to be able to keep that up for a whole year. Because I'm gonna lay down. I'm gonna be walking in the shower. I'm gonna be talking to the wife on the phone. We're gonna play Monopoly. I'm gonna screw up at some point. So I kind of turn it into, once we're in the tent, hey man, that's like an older brother thing. Like, hey, I'm still in charge of you, but I'm not Sergeant Thone fully right now.
Yeah.
So I was learning that balance of like, hey, you're more than fine to come ask me financial questions. Hey, you're more than fine to send me some stupid video you saw on YouTube. You're more than fine asking me questions about hunting, guns that you want to buy, like personal life. We got into more personal on things.
So personability.
Personability and the ability to, again, really putting yourself in somebody's shoes. It's one of those things that's, you could say over and over and over until you actually get in the mindset of doing it.
I mean, so we've got personability, emotional intelligence. I mean, those are both huge things for me, at least as a mentor, and providing guidance. If you can't put yourself in somebody else's shoes and understand where they're at, then you have no way to give them advice.
No.
And if you can't be personable enough for them to come and talk to you about their problems, then you can't fix them because you don't know about them.
Another thing is, if you don't know something, don't teach them. Don't make it up, Like, somebody asked me, like, hey, man, how do I get better at tennis? I don't play tennis. I'm not going to come up with a BS answer.
Right.
I'm going to go ask somebody that knows how to play tennis, Like, I don't know. Like,
okay,
we're going through this stuff together.
So an understanding of what you can give guidance on.
Yeah, which is another important, though. That's why, as a leader, you should know your job. Because if you don't, then
why are you in that position? Why are you leading if you don't know how to do it?
So.
Yeah, so, okay. Then how did your experience, like, affect your overall philosophy on leadership? Did it change a whole lot, or do you think you kind of just did refine it, or?
I don't think. It's going to be very contradicting. I don't think there is one set style of being a leader.
Oh, there's absolutely not.
But I also think that there is a pretty close to one set way. If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like each person, I don't believe each individual can't be taught the same way and to be effective. I think that's absolutely wrong. I think there is multiple ways out there you can lead people the exact same and teach them the exact same way. Mm-hmm. But there also is very few out there that just have one certain way and you got to figure it out how to get them. So,
well, I mean, that's not really your leadership style or your teaching. That's more like just your mannerisms and how you do, what. That's not how you're doing it; it's what you're doing with that particular soldier. Like that's one of the things that I've mainly noticed is that because like I'm the opposite. Like I think that every soldier needs the leader that they need, but it's not that. Like there are some soldiers that bulldog team leader just they do better under that because the pressure they work under pressure, right? Negative reinforcement as long as it's done in a healthy manner, is a real thing. I mean, it does work for some people. Some people have to have that pressure for them to click, but others, if you give them any kind of negative reinforcement, they just fall apart.
It's the end of the world on them, yeah.
But I don't think that's leadership style. I think that's emotional intelligence and understanding what your soldiers need from you.
More than stuff. Yeah, I get it. I got so many things in my head when it comes to that. It's such a hard wrapped around question, and it's
leadership. There's a reason that there's doctorates in leadership. Right? I mean, it's not something that. It's not something that everybody's capable of, and it's not something that everybody
changes over time too. So personally, like when we got back to Kuwait, like I did the BLC cadre thing, so I was a cadre for the BLC courses, and each cycle I noticed.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, a cadre member is basically an instructor or a teacher, and basic leader course is the course that you would attend to meet the qualifications of being a sergeant E5 in the United States Army. So, go ahead.
So my first class that I was in, that I taught, I was with another cadre. She was there beforehand, so I kind of like shadowed her to see how it went, because we were doing air assault cadre stuff right before that, and then they're like, "Hey, you're gonna go do BLC," and I was like, "Oh man!" So haven't taught a class with people some of them were the same rank as me, so it was really weird. But I realized watching her strategy was just being super friendly, just being, like, hey, I'm just like another friend of yours. I'm not an actual higher authority of you. And I definitely watched like a lot of her, like walked over. Like nobody cared, nobody listened. There was not much like there was respect there, but just like on a chill personal level. There was no them looking at her as like a higher rank,
someone who's going to teach them.
Yeah. So my next class, that was like the biggest thing I like kept in my head. I was like, okay, how do I come in stern? So I started off with, just straight eye contact, no facial smiles, no nothing. I set the rules down day one. This is what I want. I had, not threats, but like, hey, if you break any of these rules, I had no problem kicking out the scores. Which, we had. We just go tell the leadership that we had there, the actual head instructor. We're like, hey, we got this. And they were like, no BS. Because there's a long list to get BLC, let alone overseas.
Yep.
And they were like, yeah, they made it clear day one. They're like, hey, you don't do it my way, you're out. Well, then I found out my first cycle on my own, they were just like robots. There was no fun. Then when I came walking around after class, nobody would ask me questions because they're like, we don't want to talk to that guy. He's mean,
Right.
Or we're scared of him, And, and then we did like an AAR afterwards, and I just asked them, like, what do you guys think? And then a lot of them said, like, if not all of them, were like, hey, man, you're really knowledgeable. Like, you have a lot to teach, but, like, none of us want to, like, ask you anything because you're pretty scary, dude. And I was like, all right. So I took that for the next class. And the next class, I was like, okay, like, I want to make it clear to these guys. I was very clear and open about it, which is kind of where I'm going to keep continuing things. Is that, like, hey, I'm here to do this job. You have a job. I made them all stand up, tell me what their background is, what their MOS is. And I was telling them, like, hey, so, your job, you're a medic. Your job is to fix people, work on people, blah, blah. You're a tanker, or you're a tank mechanic, like you work on tanks, you make sure they're operational. It's a high value part of this, of this military. My job right now to this day is to teach you to become sergeants, to become actual NCOs. Like, that's my job. So everything I'm teaching for a reason. I was just open with them on it. And it's like, hey, here's the rules of the schoolhouse. Like, there's no smoking in the building, obviously. You will go to parade rest for any of the cadres and instructors. You will, no fighting, no males and females, all that. Yeah. There's no back talking. I just thought, like, these are the rules. Like, if you don't like it, you can get out that door. Like, this isn't me picking on you. I kept, I just let it all in the beginning. Like, this is what's going to happen. Okay. And I did. I'm very random moment in the life of the military where I'll give you an option. Like, if you don't like it, then you can leave. Yeah. Maybe not a great option, but, I was like, hey, that's how it's.
You might not want to actually do this, but it's available to you.
Yeah. And then, but I made it clear that, like, you guys have any questions, like, come ask me. And I'm looking around, and I don't want to sound cocky or anything, but like BLC, if you're infantry, like, it's pretty easy school. Like, because it's all basic.
It's all basic stuff, fundamentals and basic leadership.
Fundamentals. And I'm not saying like infantry is the best way to go in the world. It is, but it's stuff that you like. That's what we do. Yeah. Like we do land, we do deal with weapons all the time. we give op orders is something you get since day one.
Yep.
I mean, you might not give an op order, but you've been around.
But you've received one.
So it's the only thing different I'd say about BLC than it is outside the infantry is that like at a lower level that you're not writing papers every day.
Yeah.
Working the computer. All my infantry guys are like, "Hey man, how do I do this?" I'm like,
click,
who
type
here,
with fingers and stuff.
Who here works the hash out? And I kind of told him now, like, hey, for those of you, like, I can promise you, I have way more experience in this, than you do. Just like how you have more in your job. Like, ask me questions. I can almost promise you I'll be able to answer every question. If I didn't, I just went to the head editor. There was a few times where I'm like, I'm not 100%. And I always told him, like, I'm not 100%, I won't give you an answer. So just stop it. Like, give me a sec. I'd ask I'd ask the head cadre, and I'm like, hey, what's the answer to, this is what's going on, what's your input, and like, oh, here's this. And then I'd also ask, like, how can I find these resources later, which is another thing they teach at BLC is how to find resources, how to find your FMs,
Yep.
your ARs, your regulations. And, so I was learning at the same time while trying to teach. It was kind of cool.
I mean, that's the Army, right? You're always learning.
Always learning.
That's one of my favorite things about the Army, and that's like, I was a subpar student, didn't care, slept through high school, got away with it because I played football.
Yeah.
Like that still existed, back then. And the Army taught me really quick, and not that it taught me in a you need to do this way, but just I guess the Army showed me how to appreciate being a lifelong learner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a wild thing to really look back and see the way it affected you in a positive way.
Yeah.
A lot of people fail to do that. A lot of people get really twisted and they're like, oh, the Army didn't do crap for me and this and that. And you hear those disgruntled vets and stuff like that. And it's really like,
I think is what it is. They're just unhappy with themselves and they need someone to push on it.
Sometimes. So I think some people have had really bad runs, and I think that it's warranted to say that, just like any other job in the world, like sometimes you just have a bad job, and it's not necessarily that the job was bad, but maybe you just...
Well, I always ask them the same thing. Every single person that does like that overvent,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of get to the point like, okay, man, like what was, I just ask them like, what was so bad? And it's 9 out of 10 times they don't have an answer to it. And it's like, there was like you had a great military.
A lot of times you can buckle it down to one thing, and again, it's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast. Is it's having a bad leader, or a leader or an inexperienced leader who
that was the number one thing. And I asked that was like what we were supposed to ask every cycle at BLC.
Mm-hmm.
What's your least liked thing in the military, and why would you get out if you were to get out? And that was the number one answer for all the classes and each cycle was leaders. It is if they were to get out, it was because of a leader, not all leadership, because of one leader.
Yeah, because one bad leader.
I'm not saying everybody said that,
right.
But like that was the highest majority for every single class.
Right. I mean, but one bad leader affects everything.
Everything.
That's why it's so important. That's why bridging that gap and understanding, and that's why like the Missouri Guard, it luckily has got a great run with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're a testament to it yourself, deploying under the Missouri Guard versus deploying under a different component of the Army or a different, or even a different state. Sometimes, we have exceptional leaders here that understand those things. And luckily and the ones that are bad are getting phased out or they're getting removed from positions. And we do a really good job of making sure that soldiers are receiving the guidance and leadership that they need. But there's always a gap, and there's always learning, and there's always going to be just like every other job in the world. People attribute that one person to the entire Army.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Just like they'll attribute one bad manager at a car dealership to that whole dealership sucking, and no, you should never work there. Right?
Just like what you and I were talking about the other day. When I first got out, a large majority. It was I can't say a large majority. It was just honestly one excuse to get out was because of one leader.
Right, you use that one leader as an excuse to say I'm not doing this anymore, and then you were out for 4 months and you came back in, and then it's not even a full 4 months, right?
And I was like, why did you talked me back into it? We didn't even talk to me. You just made me realize, like, you're like, why did you get out? And I was like, oh, because so and so. I'm not gonna say his name, but you're like, and what else besides him? And I was like, well, yeah, there's none. I missed it. I was like,
Right, you miss every other part of the entire organization.
All the
and
other
you got up
leaders.
because of one guy.
I missed all the other leaders and everything, and then I realized, like, that's one dude, and I'm not gonna go back to the company or platoon. I'm not gonna go back to any part I've ever seen him. Which I still haven't worked with him yet in the military.
Right, so you got back. You got
won't.
back in, and now you've been back in for what is it, like 4 or 5 years now since you got back in?
Let's see, I did 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and I haven't had a single problem since.
You haven't had a single problem. You've had great leaders, and you've had the ability to grow in your career and grow personally, and all of those things. And it's so you look back at that, and you're like, why did I let that person ruin?
Oh yeah, because now my ETS day went from April to August.
Yeah, but I mean, really though, like you look at it and you're like, why did I let that person affect that decision? Because they're not going to be there forever. Yep. You're going to get promoted way faster than they are because they're at a higher level. So I mean, you could have stayed in and been a sergeant within 6 months and been promoted and moved to a new team, new squad, new platoon, new company. You don't know what's going to happen. And for me, the bad leaders actually sometimes you learn more from them because you learn exactly what not to be. And then exactly, you've been in that shoes of having a bad leader. So, if you see a bad leader, one, you can correct them because everyone has general military authority. And I mean, granted, you might get pushed back and you might get yelled at a bit, but
tomorrow's a new day.
Tomorrow's a new day. Who cares, right? And then two, you can help mentor those soldiers that are under that bad leader, and you can make it to where they know for a fact that although they're going through a little bit of a rough time in the Army right now, there are way better places, opportunities.
I hate seeing great guys, great Joes, do a 6-year contract was what a lot of people do. They'll do a 6-year contract and, they're high speed, high PT, high, shoot expert first time to go. Just those natural born awesome soldiers that you get have a huge common sense, wanting to learn. You could see them at an early age.
They're passionate.
That they're just going to be great leaders. And then they get out. And it's like, and before they get out, they were saying like, man, if I was up at that rank, it would change, And it's like, good. Like, can't wait for it to happen. But then they get out. And it's like, what? You get out, man. Like, what about all these other guys you left behind? Well, it's not my problem anymore. It's like, so you're just going to give up on these guys now, And for what? Oh, because that one guy. It's like, man, again, it's like a disease. Like we were talking about, like, negativity. You get one bad leader and it just wipes out a whole area.
Yep. But again, if you stay in
and pass it,
and you
just
pass it,
fixed it, and you
not only do you pass it up in your own career and you don't deal with it anymore. Now you have good leaders or better leaders or whatever. But now you're also making it better for how many soldiers?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were just saying yourself, like you look back and all these guys are following you. One, that's a realization moment for a leader. You're like, wow, like I make a difference. I've never been in combat. These guys know it. They know this is my first time here, but they're all following me because of who I am. One, that's a huge, like, holy crap moment, but two, it's like, that's when you realize how much of a difference you actually make. And that puts perspective in, as long as you don't, and like I said, you got a big head for a second there, but then you had to walk yourself back. You're like, okay, hang on, hold up.
Yeah.
I do make a difference here. Like for me as a leader, when I had moments like that, it was always like, that was always my thing of like, wow, I actually have power to impact meaningful change and make better careers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge moment for a leader to know, like, you really do have that ability to make or break a career in a good way. And as long as you keep your intentions pure and that, and you keep your philosophy stern and having that quiet resolve, that speak softly, carry a big stick, and that manner of ensuring that your guys have everything they need and that they know that you're there and you're going to go to bat for them, it makes the world a difference, right? So, I mean, shoot, man, we've done about 2 hours. About 2 hours.
See, this is why I sure wore my watch today, man.
Yeah, it's wild.
It don't get a watch that has to charge, okay? Because I lost my charger.
I got an Apple Watch right now, man. I forgot to charge it last night. It's at like 30%.
My Garmin's like a weird plug. You have to buy it itself.
Dude, I want the Garmin that lasts like 40 days. The Joe Rogan, the Phoenix or whatever.
Mine will last for like 2 months. But there's a solar one where it keeps recharging. So
okay, yeah,
you
I've
should
seen
reach out
that
to
one.
them to get sponsored so I can get more watches.
Yeah,
Maybe I
that'd be
get a
great.
charge
That'd be
for
great, right? If this actually takes off. But no, so thanks for coming here today, man. Thanks for
Absolutely,
everything
man.
you talked about.
Thanks for
I think
having
it
me.
really makes a big difference, and I think that if soldiers listen to this, they're gonna like. I think that I really do think that if someone's in that situation where they have that bad leader right now, that they can listen to this podcast and hopefully get some understanding that they can really make a difference if they just stick it out, and that the guard needs them, right? Every single job is detrimental to mission success, to
Yes.
security, and it doesn't matter what MOS you do. It doesn't matter if you're an 11 Bravo. It doesn't matter if you're a cook. It doesn't matter if you're a medic. It doesn't matter if you're a mechanic. Every single thing and every job that we have in this organization makes meaningful impact towards national security, towards mission success, and towards making sure that the public has the safety and ability to live about their lives the way that we do here in America. So, yeah, thanks again for coming, man, and I really appreciate you spending the time with me. So I think we're going to call it. So
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.